Hey guys, you are watching your anime world. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video, we will see second part, what if Deku became the master of Git Quirk. Here is short summary. Midoriya Izuku's Quirk is Git, the distributed version control system designed to track changes in source code and resolve conflicts in nonlinear development workflows. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. Izuku was almost jittering in his seat in excitement. It was day 2 at UA, and next on the schedule was Hero Basic Training with All Might. All Might, holy crap. When Izuku learned that All Might would be teaching this year, he thought for sure All Might would mostly be focused on the senior years. Objectively, it seemed like the best use of his time rather than teaching kids who may not have even learned how to throw a punch yet. But no, All Might would be treating all 3 years equally. Izuku had never been more happy to be wrong. It was just like Japan's greatest hero to be so fair and principled. Man, how did All Might even find the time to teach at UA? Even after decades in the business, All Might hadn't slowed down as a hero at all. When Izuku got home after school yesterday, he immediately caught up on all the hero news he missed, as was his daily ritual, and discovered that All Might had gone on a crazy 12-hour shift that day, literally leaping from city to city and resolving countless incidents. How was he supposed to keep up that insane pace and also teach all hero course students from all 3 years at UA at the same time? To Izuku, the answer was obvious. All Might was just that cool. Rewinding a bit, Day 1 at UA had been a little weird. Entering the doors of Class 1A, he got his first look at the peers he'd spend the next 3 years with. His initial impressions of his classmates were positive. Uraraka was in his class, which was fantastic. He'd already made a sort of friend before the school year even started. The boy who he'd saved from the zero-pointer, Kaminari Denki, was in his class too, which was nice. He seemed cool. The bad news was that Katsuki was also in his class. At least he seemed just as miserable to see Izuku. Good, they could suffer together. Izuku didn't get to know the rest of his classmates yet, but everyone seemed friendly enough. He was really worried that he'd find himself stuck in a class full of Kachans. But so far it seemed like everyone was just as excited and grateful to have been accepted into UA as Izuku was, which was a far cry from the egoism he had feared. The weirdness started when the class met their homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shota, who introduced himself while wearing a sleeping bag. He told them that they'd be skipping the opening ceremony and forced them all outside for a quirk assessment test. After berating the class for not taking things seriously enough, Aizawa said that the student who came in last would be expelled. The situation wasn't great for Izuku. He couldn't use his quirk on himself, and in general, his quirk wasn't very useful for a physical fitness exam. How could he use his quirk to help him with a grip strength test, or a standing long jump test, or repeated side steps, or seated toe touch? He had a few ideas though. He asked Aizawa if he could use his quirk to summon some items to help him, and he was surprised when his teacher said that no, he could only use what he had on him right now. That seemed hypocritical given that Yaoyorozu, a girl who could create objects, was free to use her quirk, but Izuku didn't fight it. First was the ball throw test, so Izuku went to Yaoyorozu and asked if she wouldn't mind making a thin wooden rod for him. With his quirk, he could anchor the ball to the end of the rod and flick it far into the distance, taking advantage of how objects retained their velocity when restored. Yaoyorozu was happy to make it for him, but both students were surprised when Aizawa came over, confiscated the rod, and claimed that Izuku could not rely on the help of others. Izuku tried a few more times by adding some of the school equipment to his quirk, but Aizawa told him not to mess with school property and that any scores he got that way would not be counted. It had become abundantly clear that Aizawa was determined to make Izuku do the test quirkless. He was deliberately blocking off any attempt of Izuku's to use his quirk despite dressing it up in language like, "Villains won't give you time to prepare." It was obvious to the whole class. The other students were also confused as to why their teacher kept focusing on Izuku specifically. The only silver lining was that Izuku wasn't the only student who did the tests quirkless. Quite a few students in the class didn't have physical enhancement quirks. Kaminari had an electricity quirk, which didn't help at all. Others included Jiro, who had some sound-related quirk, Kirishima, body hardening, Kodai, grow or shrink things, Hagakure, invisibility, and Rin, scales, all of whom were like Izuku and had to do the tests effectively quirkless. Perhaps there may have been some creative ways for the students to use their quirks in an unconventional manner to help with the tests, but after seeing how Aizawa treated Izuku for trying, no one was willing to invite their teacher's wrath on them. Izuku could see a few ways that Kodai could have altered the sizes of some equipment to help her, but that would count as messing with school property, and Izuku had already been loudly scolded for attempting that. Their group as a whole ended up at the bottom of the ranking. Izuku was fit enough that he managed to get 16th place, Kirishima and Hagakure ahead of him, while poor Kodai got last. Then Aizawa revealed that he lied and no one would be expelled, leaving everyone relieved and upset and confused. All in all, Izuku's first day at UA wasn't what he'd hoped it'd be. For the rest of the day and into the evening, Izuku spent a lot of time wondering in dismay why his homeroom teacher seemed to hate him. They'd never interacted before and knew nothing about each other. Aizawa's only impression of him was as an anonymous new student like any other in his class. Why did he have such a problem with Izuku? Or, at least, why did he seem to have such a problem with Izuku's quirk? His quirk was the best. Why would anyone have a problem with it? What, did bullies have a special, bully sense, that let them know who'd been bullied before and would be vulnerable to it? It was only late at night while he was trying to sleep that Izuku had an epiphany. Aizawa had made a big stink about, heroics is not a game, and, the world is unfair, and, you need to take this seriously. That couldn't have come from nowhere. Aizawa had been a teacher for many years and was used to teaching egotistical teenagers who just wanted to be cool and popular. Izuku himself had worried that the class would be full of kachans. So, when viewed from the outside, Izuku was the student who had gotten first place in the entrance exam by a large margin. He demolished the villain bots like it was nothing. He vanished the zero-pointer in an instant. He'd clearly been having a lot of fun as he skated around the city, perhaps not treating the exam with the grim intensity Aizawa thought he should be. With dawning horror, Izuku came to an awful conclusion. Aizawa thought that he was a kachan. Izuku was a big hotshot with a powerful quirk. Obviously, Izuku had been told his entire life that he'd be an incredible hero. Obviously, Izuku had a big ego and a swelled head and he casually used his super dangerous quirk to lord over his peers. Obviously, everyone in Izuku's life had always told him, yes, so Aizawa believed that it was his job to tell him, no. Aizawa wanted him to feel powerless. He wanted Izuku to see how weak he was when he was unprepared. Izuku needed to know that he wouldn't always get his way. He needed to be shown that he wasn't the best. He needed to be humbled. Well, Izuku did say that he wanted to play the part of the cool, confident hero student when he got to UA. Guess it was working. With all that being said, Izuku knew his theory had a few holes in it. For one, if Aizawa was worried that Izuku was a kachan, then why did he let the actual kachan run wild during the test, ultimately achieving second place? Izuku had no answer for this. Regardless, he couldn't think of any other possible explanation for Aizawa's behavior, so he'd have to work with what he had. All right, now that he knew what his teacher thought of him, what should he do now? The simple thing to do, the mature thing to do, would simply be to talk to Aizawa and explain his thoughts and feelings. Let him know that he understood where his teacher was coming from, but that his concerns were unwarranted. But in his heart, Izuku didn't think that would work. Izuku was sensitive to the way people thought, and Aizawa had already revealed a lot about himself. Aizawa's trickery and dishonesty, his power trips like not allowing them to the opening ceremony where they could meet the other students and teachers, betrayed the fact that he didn't respect his students. They were kids to be managed, not worked with. It was an explicitly unequal relationship. Aizawa was the experienced hero. It was fine to be unreasonable, to talk down to them, to screw with their feelings, because he knew better than his stupid students. Would confronting Aizawa actually improve their relationship, or would he just take it as Izuku whining that his teacher was mean and wasn't being fair? People didn't like being told that they were wrong. If anything, they tended to double down whenever it happened. That would just make everything worse. There was an alternative approach that Izuku could take instead. As far as he could tell, Aizawa was doing this because he thought Izuku needed to be humbled. He thought he was saving Izuku from his massive ego, getting him killed in the future. He thought he was being a good teacher. So, perhaps he could just let Aizawa think he was right. If Izuku acted like a normal kid, showing off his quirk, trying his best to be cool and confident, like he wanted to do at UA anyway, but then also displayed his maturity and sense of responsibility over time, then what would Aizawa have to complain about? He could pat himself on the back and think, job well done. He will have successfully shown his hotshot student that having a powerful quirk wasn't everything and that he needed to take all aspects of hero work seriously. People liked being useful. People liked being proven right. If Izuku proved Aizawa right, then Aizawa would have a more positive impression of him from that point onward, which would be helpful to Izuku in the long run. In his short life, Izuku had a lot of experience in handling other people's pride and innate sense of superiority. He was used to bad teachers. Unlike his previous bad teachers, Aizawa cared. It was just that he was thoughtless and cynical about it. Izuku could deal with that. But it was fine. Yes, this was a great plan of action that would definitely work to improve his teacher's opinion of him. He was sure of it. Anyway, that was enough reminiscing for now. I am here, coming through the door like a normal person. The class erupted in cheers and excitement as All Might goofily strode into the classroom, every step of his somehow ending up in a cool pose. Izuku almost leapt out of his seat. Oh my god, it's All Might. All Might smiled broadly at the class, waiting patiently until the clamor died down. If Izuku had his way, it'd never die down. He was jittering in his seat, physically forcing himself not to bolt out of his chair and run right up to his hero. All Might's really here. In the flesh. He's right there, just a few meters away. He's going to be our teacher. How is this real life? Once the classroom was quiet enough, All Might spoke over the remaining chatter. Thank you. I'm happy to see all of you future heroes so pumped up. Even All Might's normal speaking voice had a bellowing tone to it. He commanded attention in a very natural way. It felt like whatever All Might said was the most important thing you'd ever hear. He was so cool. Hero basic training is where you will learn the basics of being a pro hero. In your first year, we will mostly focus on physical conditioning, combat, rescue, and cooperation with your fellow heroes. You'll take the most units of this subject. We only have so much time today, so let's get right to it. I believe that we should start new chapters in our lives with a bit of excitement, so we're going to jump right into combat training. All Might lifted a remote in the air. And to go with that are these. He made a show of pressing the large red button. At the back of the class, numbered lockers popped out of the wall. Is that what I think it is? Izuku thought giddily. Costumes. All Might boomed. This is how you will present yourself to the world, young men and ladies. These costumes were made based on your quirk registrations you sent in before school started. When you wear your costume, know that you are a pro hero, and as such you represent all of heroics and the responsibility that carries. It is a mighty weight to bear, but I believe in the strength of each and every one of you. He paused for dramatic effect, then continued. After you change, gather in ground beta. Yes, sir, the class chorused. In the changing room, Izuku and the other boys got their first looks at their costumes. Izuku's costume was simple and not very flashy. If someone asked, he would have said that he valued practicality first and foremost, and he had plenty of time to redesign it to look better later. In reality, he was too self-conscious to submit his childish drawings in his UA application, so he let the support company handle it. For the moment, his costume was made of tough fabric colored green and black with some red highlights. The main body was covered with various hooks, straps, and pockets, but the designers had done a good job at integrating them so it didn't look haphazard. His head was protected by a retractable hood that had telescopic metal plating woven into the fabric. It was basically a helmet disguised as a hood, which meant it both protected his neck and looked cooler than just a helmet. His face was protected by a removable metal mouth guard with a rebreather, which served multiple purposes. Since Izuku's quirk required him to speak out loud, it was important to be able to hide his mouth so that he could use his quirk without giving villains advance warning. It also allowed him to speak in situations like a burning building where smoke inhalation was an issue. Kaminari came up to him. He'd gone with a black leather look accented with white lightning bolts. He also had support gear of some sort attached to his right arm. "Hey, Midoriya," he said with a wave. "Looking pretty badass there. Nice costume." "Thanks, you too. You look stylish." "I like the patterning," Izuku replied. "I didn't really have an aesthetic in mind when I sent my request form, but I like the colors they chose for me." "Yeah, it looks good on you." Kaminari paused for a moment. "Hey man, I didn't get a chance to say this before, but thanks for saving me at the entrance exam. I was totally out of it at the time, but they showed me the footage later." "Of course, I wasn't about to leave you to get crushed." Kaminari shrugged. "They say the zero-pointer wouldn't have actually crushed me, but I'm not sure I would have passed if I died during the exam. So, really, thank you. I owe you one." Izuku nodded. "That rescue shot me up to the top of the exam rankings, so I think we're already even, but I get it." "You're welcome. We're going to be classmates for years, so we'll have lots of opportunities to help each other out. By the way, your concussion is all healed up by now, right?" Kaminari looked to the side awkwardly. "Oh, I didn't have a concussion, that was caused by my quirk. But it's okay now. See this baby?" He lifted his arm and showed off the gear attached to it. "Ua made this directional blaster for me, so I can direct my lightning wherever I want now easily. Long range, too. It's awesome." "Wait, what had Kaminari just said? You aren't immune to your own electricity?" he asked in surprise. Kaminari suddenly looked a bit panicked. No, I am, just not entirely. My brain kind of gets fried if I overuse it, and that's what you saw at the exam. But, like I said, that's not a problem anymore. I have this now, so you're never going to see me like that again. Everything's great." He grinned and gave a cheery thumbs up. But Kaminari didn't have that device for his entire life up until now. Izuku recognized the look on Kaminari's face, his behavior, his desperation. It was so painfully familiar. The dots were connecting in Izuku's head. "People bullied you because of your quirk, didn't they?" Izuku said sadly. Before Kaminari could start sputtering out denials, Izuku continued, "It was the same for me." Kaminari was shocked out of whatever he was going to say next. "Wait, really? You? How?" Izuku immediately regretted saying anything. Right, no wonder Kaminari was trying to avoid the subject. Talking about this felt awful. But it'd be way worse if he stopped now after already bringing it up. "Believe it or not, I didn't know how to use my quirk until a year ago, so my classmates thought I was lying about having a quirk. It really everyone made of me for being a delusional weirdo." He sighed. "And I know how stupid this sounds coming from the guy who scored first place, but I got lucky with the entrance exam. I need gear and stuff to help me with my quirk too. You saw how useless I was at the test yesterday." "You mean how useless we both were," Kaminari grumbled. "What the heck was up with that anyway? Sensei was being so weird to you." "Sensei introduced himself to us while wearing a sleeping bag. He's a weird man." Kaminari laughed. True. Hey, so, look, man, I didn't mean for this to get heavy or anything. I just wanted to say thanks for the exam. Yeah. I got lucky with it too because we were facing robots and because you helped me, but I'm going to be an awesome hero from this point forward, so I can help you too whenever you need it." "Right on." Izuku beamed. Kaminari gave another thumbs up and turned to leave, but before that Izuku took another stab at trying to be more open with his feelings. "Hey, Kaminari, we're here now. Both of us. Doesn't matter what people thought. We made it." Kaminari smiled softly. "Yeah, we did." He paused, then held his fist up. Izuku grinned and fist bumped his new friend and they both walked out together to meet with the rest of the class and All Might. "Hi, Uraraka," Izuku called out. He and Kaminari had walked to ground beta where they met up with the others. "Your costume looks great." Oh, Midoriya, I'm glad you think so. Uraraka looked embarrassed. It's not really what I wanted. I asked for it to be astronaut-themed, but instead she squirmed inside her skin-tight bodysuit, obviously uncomfortable with feeling so exposed. Kaminari came up to join them. They ignored you. Really? That's weird. They made me exactly what I asked for, he said, showing off the support gear attached to his arm. Uraraka looked sheepish. Not exactly. My quirk makes me nauseous when I overuse it, so I asked if there was any way to help with that. Apparently, the bodysuit squeezes pressure points on my body, and that helps somehow. She shrugged. The note said that adding a full astronaut suit as a second layer would make me overheat during hero work. Izuku pondered that. Maybe you could wear a light jacket over top instead. Oh, I know. Kaminari jumped in. You could get a flight jacket like the ones that jet pilots wear. I guess it's more sky-themed than space-themed, but aren't a lot of astronauts also pilots? Uraraka thought about it. I'm not sure. That's more of a military thing, right? I want to be a rescue hero, so I'm not sure it fits. Kaminari scratched the back of his head. Well, it was just an idea. Oh, no. Uraraka waved her hands frantically. It's a good idea. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll think of something, Izuku said. I bet our other classmates. I see you all have arrived. All Might shouted. The three of them jumped in surprise. Oh, class was starting. Right, okay. They grouped up with the rest of their classmates in front of All Might. It's a common belief that battles with villains mostly take place outside. If you think of my own famous battles, none of them occurred indoors. In reality, that perception is entirely false. Imprisonment, black markets, backroom deals, in this society of heroes, truly intelligent villains hide in the shadows. All Might raised a finger. However, this goes both ways. Even though heroics is a public-facing career, most of your work as a hero will never be known to the public. And that is critical to keep in mind at all times. Who you are in the dark is just as important as who you are in the light. Your job as a hero will require many sacrifices to save people who may never know they were in danger at all. I have spent much of my career being as visible as possible so that I may inspire peace and safety across Japan. But that is not the only approach to heroics, and it is also not always the most helpful. Even an old man like me had to learn that lesson myself recently. A helping hand that cannot be seen lifts a person just as much. All Might clapped his hands together. I apologize for the sudden lecture. Now then, let's get on with it. In this exercise, you will be split into two-person teams of heroes and villains. The villain team will hide a bomb within a hideout. They must protect the bomb or catch the hero team. The hero team must catch the villains or acquire the bomb within the allotted time. You will use capture tape to capture your opponent. Any attempts to seriously injure your classmates will result in immediate disqualification. He pulled out a box filled with numbered balls. Now let us draw lots. Everyone crowded around to grab a ball. Izuku ended up with a ball marked G. Hey, what did you get? Kaminari asked him. I'm on Team E. I'm on Team G. Izuku replied. Uraraka, what did you get? I got Team B, she answered. I guess we need to go find our partners. Izuku checked with a few other students and soon enough found the person with the matching G ball. It was a tall quiet boy with a kind of rock-shaped head. Kota, if he remembered correctly. Izuku didn't know much about him. I will announce the first teams. All Might pulled out another set of balls. The heroes will be Team B. And the villains will be Team G. Oh shoot, he was up first. And Uraraka was on Team B, right? He looked over and saw that Uraraka was already coming over to meet him. The invisible girl, Hagakure, was with her. Hi again, Uraraka said brightly. Your partner is Kota. All right, we won't be going easy on you. Let the best team win, yeah. She stuck out her hand for a handshake. Izuku shook her hand. Of course. We won't be going easy on you either. Uraraka grinned and went over to talk to Kota. Izuku turned to face Hagakure, whose hero costume faded away so that she became fully invisible. Cool. Izuku stuck out his hand for a handshake awkwardly, not sure if he was pointing his hand in the right direction. Let the best team win. An invisible hand grabbed his own. Right back at ya. Hope you two are ready to lose. Hagakure said cheerfully. A sudden thought crossed Izuku's mind. Get at Hagakure_Toru, he mumbled as quietly as he could while he was still holding the girl's hand. Villain team, go in first and set up. Hero team, in 5 minutes you will break in and the battle will start. Everyone else, head to the monitor room. Time to do this. Chapter text. What are you thinking, Kota? Izuku asked. They stood in a room with a large papier match bomb in the center and 2 doors leading to adjacent rooms. Every room in the building had at least 2 doors, probably so that they couldn't just barricade a single entranceway. Izuku had realized a problem, and he felt really dumb for not thinking of it earlier. He was wearing his brand new costume, so he couldn't summon anything he'd prepared in advance because it was all anchored to his normal clothes. He had a long list of things that he wanted to talk to the support department about, but that wouldn't help him here. The battle trial would have to be a test of how well he could utilize his quirk in its raw state with no preparation. Kota was silent for a long time, then he whispered, I don't think I can help. It was kind of hard for Izuku to hear him. Kota's voice was very soft. Don't say that. What's your quirk? I can talk to animals and ask them to do things for me. Kota looked down at the ground. But there aren't any animals here. There should be mice or other critters around, but the building isn't real. I think the walls are just solid blocks. And there's no food here. Izuku nodded. All right. Do you happen to know how to fight? Have you taken self-defense lessons or anything? No. Kota curled in on himself further. My dream is to be a rescue hero in forests and mountains. I don't like fighting. Oh no. Kota was losing heart already. Maybe he could cheer him up. That's an amazing dream, Izuku insisted. You're going to be incredible. If all the animals in a forest can help you, you can do so much. Like, hikers won't go missing ever again. You're going to save a lot of people. Yeah, that doesn't help me now though. Kota squirmed again. He was really uncomfortable. I'm not sure I should be here. I barely passed the exam. I wouldn't have without my bird friends. They told me where the robots were and where people needed help. It was weird. Everyone Izuku talked to in his class so far believed they barely passed the exam and only got in by luck. Granted, he only had a sample size of 2, but it was kind of telling. UA put so much pressure on you that no matter how good you did, it still didn't feel like you were good enough. The written exam was like that too. It was designed so that you'd start to fail as you got further and further along into it. During the physical exam, Izuku knew at the time that he'd done excellently at it. However, on the very first day of school, Aizawa went out of his way to put Izuku down and make him feel like he wasn't good enough. Man, UA was harsh. It's fine if you don't want to be a fighter, Izuku said. You're going to be an awesome hero no matter what. And it's the first day of class. At our skill level, size and weight are way more important. You could probably capture Uraraka or Hagakure by just falling on one of them. Kota let out a little laugh. Nice job, Izuku. Izuku was proud of himself for handling this as well as he had, but internally he still felt very awkward. It was such a weird role reversal for him. Kota was a gentle, peaceful person by nature. Looking at it from Kota's perspective, he was partnered with the top scorer on the entrance exam, the exam that glorified destruction and violence. Their first hero exercise involved fighting their classmates over a bomb. Kota wasn't going to take charge here. It was all Izuku's responsibility. At Aldera, he was at the bottom of the totem pole, the delusional Deku. The other kids considered him to be fair game to make fun of. Now he was at UA, among the best hero hopefuls in the country, and it was taken for granted that he was the leader. Oh, Kota hesitated. I don't remember what your quirk is. Did you say? I can create alternate timelines, Izuku's mouth responded by habit, like a dumbass. Stupid. He shook his head. Sorry, it's more like I can create save points. It's hard to explain, and I don't think we have time right now. Will it help us against Uraraka and Hagakure? I don't know how we can defend against someone invisible. No worries there. Get grep Hagakure_Toru. Izuku grinned with self-satisfaction. I have a few ideas. Izuku patrolled the hallway near the bomb room, trying his best to look alert and paranoid. He frequently whipped his head back and forth toward any little sound or creak the building made. Occasionally he spoke terse updates to Kota over the headset, stuff like, "No sign of them yet." It was all an act. He knew exactly where Hagakure was, and it was a struggle to keep himself from smiling. The magic of Grep, what a dumb name, meant that he was aware of the invisible girl's precise location at all times. Grep didn't at all feel like sight, the sense was more similar to proprioception. He knew where Hagakure was, where each of her limbs were, where she was looking, everything. At the moment, Hagakure was softly and carefully walking up to him, invisible capture tape in hand. Izuku had to admit, she was good. Really good. He'd figured that since he knew exactly where she was, he ought to be able to spot her with his normal senses somehow. Maybe hearing very quiet footsteps, or maybe seeing dust in the air slightly out of place. Something. But no, she was giving out no signals at all. Izuku was extremely impressed. Hagakure snuck her way closer and closer until she was right behind him. She readied her capture tape. This was it. Right when Hagakure leaned forward to wrap the capture tape around her seemingly oblivious opponent, Izuku ducked out of nowhere and swept his leg backward. Hagakure was already unbalanced from leaning forward, so she tripped on Izuku's leg and fell toward him. Izuku flipped around and caught her in a bear hug. Ah! She yelped in shock at the sudden reversal. Izuku had already ripped the capture tape from Hagakure's hands and started wrapping it around her, taking advantage of her shock and his larger size to keep her held in place. He'd nearly knotted the tape when all of a sudden Hagakure slithered out of his grip. Izuku gasped in bewilderment as Hagakure contorted her body to slide right out from the tape wrapped around her. He tried to grab hold of her, but it was like trying to grip water. Somehow she kept on angling herself just right that his fingers slid right off any part of her body he tried to grab. One final dip freed Hagakure from the tape completely, and she frantically jumped away from him. She seemed shaken. Jesus, that was close, she exclaimed, breathing heavily. Izuku dumbly looked down at the now visible, tangled capture tape in his arms, and then back up to Hagakure. "How did you do that? How did you know I was there?" she blurted in response. Fair enough. They both had talents they'd rather not reveal to the enemy. The two of them looked at each other. Hagakure seemed to startle again when he looked directly into her eyes. Oops, he had given away that he could see her. Not that it wasn't obvious already, but he might have been able to play it off as instinct or something, even if it wasn't a believable excuse. Nothing to it then. This was just going to be a straight-up duel. They both got into fighting stances and then launched themselves at each other. Izuku had a number of inherent advantages in this fight. For one thing, he was just bigger and heavier. That couldn't be taken lightly. There was a reason that all combat sports were separated into weight classes. Having a longer reach meant that you could strike your opponent without getting close enough that they could strike you in return. Additionally, Izuku's grep-fueled proprioception meant that he knew exactly where Hagakure was planning to strike him. Hagakure actually had two disadvantages here. In Izuku's martial arts classes, they were taught how not to be predictable in fights. Stuff like quick hits, feints, and sudden changes in direction and speed to keep your opponent guessing and unable to anticipate your next move. Since Hagakure was invisible, she had learned none of that. Even without grep's precise motion detection, all of her movements were blatantly obvious and predictable well in advance. All of this meant jack shit as Izuku immediately found himself on the defensive, quickly being driven back by Hagakure's flurry of attacks. What the hell? It didn't matter that Izuku knew what Hagakure was going to do next when he wasn't fast enough to do anything about it. She was ridiculously flexible too. She kept on sending powerful kicks straight toward his head that he was barely able to back away from in time. Izuku certainly couldn't lift his leg up that high, and even if he could he'd be left wide open. But Hagakure was so quick and efficient that she left no openings for him to counterattack. They were getting closer and closer to the bomb room because Izuku had to keep on retreating. Even when Izuku tried to strike Hagakure in return, she just slid away from his punches like it was nothing. He somehow managed to get a couple of decent hits in that Hagakure had to actually block rather than effortlessly weave around, but it was incomparable to the number of hits she was getting on him. He was going to be so bruised after this, even with his new costume that was blunting the blows. He thought he was a pretty decent fighter. He thought he had an advantage, multiple advantages, but he was squandering it because Hagakure was just so much better than him. Good for her, though. Izuku winced in pain as he barely blocked another kick that was headed straight toward his face. It would have knocked him out cold if it connected. Hagakure huffed in frustration. "You're good," she grumbled. Oh, he was. Really? That made him feel a bit better. It sure didn't feel like it from his perspective. Izuku backed into the bomb room wondering if there was any way he could hold Hagakure at the door. She had less freedom of movement there. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw Uraraka racing toward the other entranceway from the hull outside. Kota was desperately running after her, but he wasn't going to catch up. Damn it, he named their traps, trap_left, and trap_right, but with Hagakure barreling down on him, he couldn't remember if that was from the perspective of inside or outside the room. Whatever, this was what wildcards were for. Git restore trap_*. Rolls of capture tape appeared stretched across both doorways like spider webs. Uraraka couldn't slow down and crashed right into the trap, tripping on the tape and rolling into the room, capture tape wrapping all along her. Kota caught up, out of breath, and saw Uraraka lying dazed on the floor. With a graceless thump, he fell right on top of her. Ha ha, go Kota. Kota searched for the end of the capture tape so that he could tie a knot and officially capture Uraraka. She squirmed under him, but with his size and weight Kota wasn't going anywhere. Uraraka was trapped, and there was nothing she could do about it. At least that was what Izuku thought, but then Kota started floating. He panicked and lost his grip, resulting in him awkwardly floating in the middle of the room, flailing his arms about, swimming to nowhere. Right, a weight advantage doesn't help against someone who can make things weightless, Izuku thought, mentally kicking himself. Then he had to block another literal kick from Hagakure. Get it, girl, Hagakure cheered. Uraraka untangled herself from the tape and launched herself at the fake bomb. No, Izuku shouted. Yes, Uraraka responded with glee. Well, guess he had to pull out his last trick. Get switch other room. The bomb vanished. Uraraka sailed straight through the spot the bomb used to be and nearly crashed into the opposing wall. What the heck? Uraraka yelled, spinning around to stare directly at Izuku. Hagakure too had stopped fighting to stare at him. Her gaze was intense. Izuku whistled innocently. Uraraka looked at him suspiciously. Hold on, is this allowed? The villain team can't just make their bomb disappear, right? Nope, that's not what I did. Izuku went over to Kota and pulled him down so that he was standing upright again. Uraraka graciously cancelled her quirk. The bomb's still in the building, just somewhere else now. He gave a cheeky grin. Better go find it. Hagakure threw her hands in the air and groaned. Man, she sounded angry. Regardless, the girls pulled themselves together and sprinted out of the room. They knew that, if they were lucky, they might be able to find the bomb before the boys reached it, which would grant them an automatic victory. Come on, let's go, Izuku said to Kota, and then both of them ran downstairs to the room directly beneath the previous bomb room. The fake bomb sat there untouched. The two split up to guard each entranceway. I wasn't able to get Uraraka, Kota whispered miserably as they waited for the hero team to find them. I screwed up, I'm sorry. It's totally fine. Hagakure beat me black and blue too. Neither of us screwed up. The girls are just awesome. And we definitely haven't lost yet. They waited another minute, and then Izuku sensed Hagakure coming their way. Heads up. They've almost found us. Oh, they have found us. Hagakure sees you, but now she's backing away. Are they planning something? Must be. They can't win by charging us directly because I can just move the bomb back upstairs. And if they split up then we can just gang up on them one at a time. Kota thought about that for a moment. If they can't get at the bomb, then they have to try to capture us instead. Izuku nodded. That's what I'm thinking. If I were them, I'd focus on taking me down. Once I'm out of the match, I'm not allowed to move the bomb around anymore. How much time is left? I'm not sure. Not long. They're going to have to make their move soon. Oh, here they come. Hagakure is on your side. Izuku turned to look for Uraraka, only to suddenly see a filing cabinet flying through the air straight for his face. Release. Izuku scrambled out of the way as the filing cabinet tumbled into the room and slammed onto the floor with a loud clang. Uraraka entered the room, and to his right Izuku saw that Hagakure had entered the room as well. He and Kota both had totally failed at guarding the entrance ways. Oh well. Get switch first room. The bomb vanished again. From the sudden smug look on Uraraka's face, he knew he'd made a mistake. Do it, she shouted at Hagakure. Huh, what could Hagakure do? Izuku turned to look and saw power radiating from across the room. His jaw fell open in shock. Was that really Hagakure? Light itself seemed to distort around the invisible girl, gathering together in a ray of shining brilliance. Hagakure leapt and performed a grand uppercut. Sunrise. Smash. The explosion was deafening. The great display of power had blown the ceiling wide open. Not wasting a second, Uraraka made herself weightless, jumped through the hole in the ceiling, and landed in the room above. She placed a hand on the fake bomb in triumph. Hero team wins, All Might announced over the intercom. But Izuku wasn't paying attention to any of that. He didn't see Uraraka's feet. He didn't notice All Might's announcement. He was solely focused on the mutilated form of Hagakure collapsed on the ground. Hagakure's arm was completely shattered. Izuku suddenly regretted how detailed his grep sense was. He could feel her bones pointing in the wrong directions and gruesomely piercing her skin. He could feel the way her arm was only barely still connected to her shoulder. His own right arm seized up in sympathetic pain. Izuku was breathing hard, his heart pounding frantically. What did she do? What the hell happened? She was lying prone on the floor, delirious and whimpering. It felt like she wanted to scream in agony, but she didn't have the focus or energy to do so. Blood was everywhere. Shit, was she bleeding out? All Might was still chattering over the comms congratulating them on a job well done. Kota was helping Uraraka jump back down to the lower room. What was everyone doing? Why were they acting like everything was fine? No one else could see her, he realized. Only him. Help. Izuku screamed into the comms. All Might, help. Uraraka and Kota startled and turned to face him. A blink later and All Might was already in the room. Izuku didn't even see where he came from. In all the videos he'd watched, he'd never seen All Might move that fast. Young man, what? Izuku's arm trembled as he pointed at Hagakure's prone body. He expected to have to explain the situation, but All Might was already on it. With anguish on his face, All Might rushed to Hagakure's side and very gently lifted her so that her crippled arm was supported and no additional harm would be done. Izuku had no idea how All Might knew what happened without being able to see Hagakure, but it was clear he knew how to take care of someone grievously injured. I am sorry. Please inform your classmates that today's exercise is cancelled, All Might said, then he soared out the window with Hagakure carefully tucked in his arms. Huh, what's going on? What happened to Hagakure? Asked Uraraka nervously, running up to him. Why are you staring at the wall? Izuku wasn't staring at the wall, he was staring in the direction of Hagakure. He could still sense her thanks to grep. Midoriya, what happened? Please tell me, Uraraka pleaded. Frankly, Izuku had no idea what happened. Hagakure's quirk was invisibility, so what was that punch? And why did it destroy her arm? Could an injury like that even be healed? He swallowed and turned to face Uraraka and Kota. Right, sorry, I'll tell you what I saw. Izuku didn't return to his classmates. Uraraka and Kota would have to explain to them what happened. Rather, Izuku followed the light in his head that pointed him to Hagakure. He could feel that she was lying down now, so she was probably in a medical bed. Finding Hagakure took more time than he wanted. He knew where she was relative to him, but he still had to navigate UA's confusing corridors to reach her. Eventually, he found and entered the infirmary. He heard faint voices coming from one of the rooms. Did you seriously teach her nothing, you buffoon? I swear, I didn't know this would happen, I would never have. Now, let us focus on our immediate concerns. Finger pointing can come later. Please inform of us your diagnosis, Chio. HMPH. I've stopped the bleeding, but I cannot use my quirk on M's Hagakure in her current state. She requires fairly extensive surgery to arrange her bones in the proper positions before using any sort of accelerated healing quirk. Unfortunately, her invisibility prevents me from performing that surgery myself. Young Toru is. Be quiet, Toshinori. I know of an overseas specialist with an echolocation quirk, Dr. Maharaj, who often performs difficult surgeries such as this. He is often booked solid, but hopefully we can fly him into Japan within a reasonable time frame. There will be permanent damage to her arm regardless, but the longer we wait, the worse it will be. Consider it done. How long do we have, and what are our next options if the doctor is unavailable? I'll have to do more tests to be sure, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Izuku knocked softly and entered the room. Hagakure was lying on a cot near the back. The other 3 occupants of the room reacted in different ways to his presence. All Might was sitting in a chair far too small for him, head held in his hands. He didn't look up or even seem to notice Izuku's entry. Conversely, Recovery Girl very much noticed Izuku. She turned and glared daggers at him. It looked like she was a moment away from screaming at him to get out, held back only by professionalism. Principal Nedzu, however, visibly perked up when he saw Izuku. The small creature waddled over to him. "Good afternoon, Mr. Midoriya. How may we help you?" Izuku cleared his throat nervously. I can heal Hagakure, sort of." All Might looked up, suddenly paying attention. Recovery Girl stared at him sternly. "Elaborate." "It's not healing, exactly. My quirk lets me make save points. I can revert Hagakure back to right before we started the battle trial, but, it affects everything. Her memories. She wouldn't remember any of this. For her, it'll be like nothing ever happened." Yes, do it, please do it, please." Hagakure abruptly shrieked from the bed, startling them all. Whoa, Izuku didn't know she was conscious. Wouldn't they have pumped her full of painkillers? How badly must she be hurting? Nedzu clapped his little paws together. "That covers the issue of consent. Very well, I will use the class recordings and UA security footage to create a video covering the pertinent period of time. Toshinori, please show it to M's Hagakure when she returns." He walked over to the door. "I shall go do that now, so please carry on without me." The principal left. Izuku turned back to the others. All Might." "Yes, my boy." All Might looked horrible. Deep guilt was etched onto the lines of his face. It looked so strange to see the symbol of peace like this. And his voice was softer than Izuku had ever heard it. "When I restore Hagakure, she's not going to be here. She's going to be where I saved her, which is back on the training field. From her perspective, she's just about to start the battle trial, but then everyone around her will vanish. Maybe you should be there so that she's not alone and so that you can explain everything to her." All Might patted him on the shoulder. Yes, that is an excellent idea, my boy. I will go." He paused. "Thank you." He then left the room as well. One last thing to do. Izuku walked over and sat down on the chair next to Hagakure's bed. Hagakure, you're listening, right?" He received a pained grunt in reply. "I just want to be really clear about what my quirk actually does." His mouth felt like sandpaper. He swallowed and forged ahead. "I'm not healing you. I'm not rewinding you. I'm not changing you back. I'm undoing you. I'm replacing you with a previous version of you. I don't know exactly how it works, but it's possible that this process kills you, and then a different Hagakure Toru takes your place." Recovery Girl looked deeply unhappy with every word that came out of his mouth, but she didn't say anything. "Are you absolutely sure you want to do this?" Hagakure turned to look at him, wincing in pain as she did so. She looked miserable and in utter agony. It was obvious she'd been crying. "I want this," she rasped. "Please just kill me already." "Well, fair enough," he supposed. He grabbed hold of her uninjured hand with his own and squeezed. He didn't need to touch her to do this, but some part of him didn't want the girl to be alone when she ceased to exist. "Get restore Hagakure_Toru." The words left his lips, and then the bed was empty. Izuku wiped his eyes and leaned back in his chair. What a day. Hagakure Toru felt horrible, not just physically, although that was a massive part of it. The pain she felt was unbearable. She couldn't even look at her arm without feeling like she needed to throw up. She took one look at her bloody fractured bones piercing her skin and had to look away. It was repulsive. More importantly, however, Toru felt like a fraud. She didn't deserve one for all. Toru had always wanted to be a hero. As much as she wanted to be a frontline hero and show herself to the world, she knew that wouldn't happen with a quirk like hers. So she devoted herself to becoming the best at what she was best at. Uraraka had been worried about going up against Midoriya. He was the top scorer on the entrance exam, after all. Toru had responded by poo-pooing Uraraka's concerns entirely. He's not so scary, she said. We both beat his ass on the assessment test yesterday. Don't be intimidated. Toru bragged with complete confidence that she would take Midoriya down before he even knew what hit him. This type of exercise was made for her. Stealth takedowns were her bread and butter. She'd humbled so many overconfident hero wannabes before. It would be a piece of cake. And so, it was a real kick in the gut when Midoriya beat her at her own game. She'd almost been taken out of the match instantly and only managed to escape at the last moment by nearly dislocating her shoulders. That would have been mortifying if she lost like that after all her bragging. It stung, but not all was lost. She knew she was an excellent fighter, even without her invisibility. With her invisibility, she was unmatched. Her martial arts classes had long since given up on pairing her up against just a single other person. No one could protect themselves from a punch to the face that they couldn't see, so one-on-one spars were too easy for her. Instead, Toru tended to fight against whole groups of other students all at once. They'd try to protect each other, limit her movement, and hopefully get in some lucky strikes. And even still she often won those fights. She was such a great fighter that she could take on her entire martial arts class at once and come out on top. A one-on-one fight like this one, even if Midoriya could somehow see her, was her chance to shine. Which made it all the more distressing when she threw everything she had at Midoriya and the just wouldn't go down. She didn't understand. She was a lot faster and more skilled than him, but it didn't matter. It was like he knew what she was going to do before she did it. It was infuriating. Nothing she did was working. This should have been easy, but she just couldn't do it. Midoriya had even gotten a couple of hits on her, and they hurt. He was strong. If she was injured, she wouldn't be able to keep this up. The only thing she could do was keep him busy enough that he couldn't counterattack. If she let up for even a second, she wasn't sure what would happen. What was even worse was the painful realization that he was holding back. This was the guy who got second place in villain points on the exam, losing only to the guy whose quirk was literally explosions. He was perfectly capable of putting in enough force to destroy robots, and she'd heard he somehow even defeated the zero-pointer. The zero-pointer, Ing Hao. He obviously could use his quirk offensively and highly destructively, but he wasn't doing it because they weren't supposed to hurt their classmates. This exercise was what she was best at. This was her chance to prove herself. She was putting everything she had into this, and she still couldn't win against someone who was holding back because he didn't want to hurt her. It was humiliating. For nearly all her life, all she had was her invisibility. She never had anything else to help her. She'd trained for so many years for this exact situation. If she couldn't win here, then what was even the point of her being a hero? Toru was relieved when she finally managed to get to the bomb room. It was a slimmer victory than she hoped for, but they'd done it. Uraraka was going to win for them right now. But the fire in her chest was abruptly doused with cold water when the bomb disappeared. The whole fight didn't matter. Midoriya never even needed to fight her, he did it for fun. To stall her a bit, he could just teleport the bomb around and there was nothing Toru could do about it. The whole time he was just playing with her. She and Uraraka were doomed from the start. Midoriya outclassed them both. As for Kota, it wasn't nice to say, but Kota didn't do much. The match was really more of a 2v1, or a 2v1.5 at best. And they were still losing. But Toru couldn't lose. She just couldn't. All Might was watching, and she needed to prove she was worthy of the trust he placed in her. It was obvious that All Might had chosen this to be the class's first lesson for her sake. He prepared that whole speech about an invisible helping hand, and everything. They wouldn't have done this exercise if it weren't for her. Toru was sure of it. This lesson was built around her exact skill set precisely so that she could show off. She couldn't live with herself if she lost. That's why Toru did what she did. She didn't know how to use One for All, and she hadn't bulked up as much as All Might recommended because she wanted to remain nimble and flexible, but she was desperate. She needed this. Toru would prove that it wasn't a mistake to entrust her with this power. So she went for it. Her moment of triumph. What a joke. What a joke. From what Recovery Girl was saying, she'd ate up her arm permanently. And for what? To barely eke out a victory in a 2v1 against an opponent who wasn't trying all that hard. She wasn't worthy. She was a complete failure. She should give One for All back so that All Might could find someone who actually deserved it. On cue, the door to her room in the infirmary opened, and in came Midoriya. Sake, why was he here? She hated him. She hated him so much. Just looking at him made her angry. And she knew it wasn't his fault. They barely knew each other, but he seemed sweet and friendly enough. Strong, talented, and humble. He was everything a good hero should be. She hated him for it. I can heal Hagakure, sort of. Of course he could heal people too. Here he was, the perfect little hero, coming to save her. She couldn't beat him when she was in her element, but for him, it was just one of his many talents. God, she was such a horrible person. Midoriya was just trying to help, and all she felt was resentment. Her gut churned with self-loathing. She was scum. She wasn't normally like this. She thought she was a good person. A kind person. All Might himself seemed to think that she was worthy of being his successor. She hated that she felt like this. She hated that her pointless jealousy had led her to make such an idiotic decision. Now she would have to live with the consequences of her up for the rest of her life. Everything was wrong. She didn't want this. She didn't want to be like this. She wished today had never happened. She'd give anything if she could take it all back. It's not healing, exactly. My quirk lets me make save points. I can revert Hagakure back to right before we started the battle trial, but, it affects everything. Her memories. She wouldn't remember any of this. For her, it'll be like nothing ever happened. Holy, you're shitting me. Yes, do it, please do it, please. In a few moments, Hagakure Toru would cease to be, and she couldn't be more thrilled about it. This had all been a big mistake, but she was getting a second chance. She wasn't going to waste it. The new her wouldn't truly know what happened. The new her wouldn't have experienced any of the feelings she felt right now. The new her would learn how to use One for All properly, and so this would never happen again. Midoriya Izuku would just be a cool classmate of hers who helped her out. Their relationship would be a clean slate. She didn't want to hate him. She didn't want to be the type of person who would hate him. She'd do better next time. Who knows, maybe they could even be friends. Chapter text. It was a new day. Izuku had just gotten off the train and was heading to UA to start his third day at Hero School. It had been an eventful first couple of days, for sure. Not really quite what he'd expected, but hopefully these were just growing pains. The battle trial yesterday was fun and satisfying, so long as he ignored how it ended. With that said, it had only been 2 days, and he was already starting to make friends. At least a little bit. That alone made it 1,000,000 times better than the last 10 years of schooling combined. Izuku walked along, lost in thought, when suddenly someone poked him on the shoulder. He whipped his head around, but no one was there. Wah! He heard soft giggling to his left. Oh, get grep Hagakure_Toru. Hagakure was there skipping alongside him. How long have you been walking with me? Wouldn't you like to know? She teased. Her school uniform then materialized, visible to the naked eye once again. While it was nice to see Hagakure looking chipper, Izuku didn't feel ready to face her again so soon. The imagery of the girl begging him to revert her yesterday stayed with him all last night. Even after he warned her that he might be killing her by using it, she asked to die. That was, Izuku didn't want to think too hard about it. Truthfully, despite his warning, Izuku didn't really believe that his quirk worked by killing people and replacing them with a newly created clone. If he sincerely thought it did, he'd never have suggested using his quirk in the first place. He justified his belief based on how his quirk consistently seemed to be incapable of creating anything new. It only ever reused things that already existed, or existed at one point in the past. It shifted things. Like, even when he used git erm on an object to delete it, he had to commit the object first, which saved it. Was he really deleting objects, or was he just temporarily shifting them into pocket dimensions or something? The fact that he couldn't delete uncommitted objects implied that his quirk couldn't destroy things. So far, every application of his quirk involved shifting things through time and space, not creation and destruction. It had to work like that, because the alternative was unacceptable. Anyway, Hagakure was still walking beside him. He couldn't let memories of yesterday deter him. Come on, Izuku. He tried to hype himself up. Your classmate wants to talk to you. A girl wants to talk to you. Speak with her like a normal person. Izuku shoved down his anxieties and made sure to smile brightly at Hagakure. I'm glad you're in high spirits after yesterday. I was kind of worried about that. She shrugged. Well, it won't lie, it was pretty weird. Like, I was shaking your hand, and then you and everyone disappeared. I was so confused at first. But it was pretty cool too. I'm literally the girl who leapt through time. She mimed zipping forward with her arms. Not many people could say that. That's a cool way of looking at it. I'm sorry about everything, regardless. I hope you're not too upset about losing those memories. Hagakure shrugged. It's not like I missed much, and the principal showed me a video of everything that happened, so I basically got the gist of it. She turned to face him directly. Also, don't say sorry. It sounds like you really saved my bacon. I'm here because I wanted to thank you. So yeah, thank you. You're welcome. I kinda wanted to talk to you about our battle yesterday. Izuku felt pretty bad that the memories Hagakure lost were of her first ever hero exercise at UA. Sure, he understood why Hagakure wanted to forget the pain of her shattered arm, but personally, he would have hated to lose a memory of his accomplishments. He felt awful for stealing away the pride of her very first victory. It's too bad that you've forgotten it. You don't have the memories anymore of you kicking my ass. Oh, really? Yeah, really, he exclaimed. Didn't you say you watched the video? I'm bruised all over from the beating you gave me. I hope that someday I'm as good as you. Hagakure hummed. You seem to hold your own pretty well from what I saw. I was kind of cheating, Izuku said dismissively. Well, using my quirk isn't cheating, obviously, but, hold on, let me describe this better. His quirk was always so difficult to try to explain. When I use my quirk on something, I can also then track its exact position. It's not like a vague feeling, it's extremely precise. So if I use it on a person, then I can feel where they are, the direction they're looking, I can feel the muscles tensing in their body, everything. I can generally tell what they're going to do before they do it. That's handy. She was impressed. It is, and it was doubly effective on you, he continued. I can tell you're not used to people being able to see you, so your movements are pretty obvious. No offense. I'm usually able to win sparring matches by using my quirk to predict my opponents, but I was totally out of my league when it came to you. Like, you're so good. I was floored. I am a pretty damn good fighter, yeah, she said, pleased by his praise. I wouldn't count yourself out, though. We're all in school to help each other out, so maybe we could get together sometime and practice sparring. I could show you my skills and teach you some stuff. I'd love that. Izuku beamed. Thank you so much. You're a lot better than me, so I'm not sure what I can bring to the table in return. He paused. Well, you don't have much practice fighting against people who can see you, right? So I guess fighting me would be useful for you. Even if our skill levels aren't really comparable, I'm sure I could help. Sounds great, she chirped. It's a date, then. Izuku's cheeks reddened a little bit. You just had to put it like that, didn't you? She laughed at him in return. Har har. Anyway, I'm not sure when would be the best time. Wait, what the heck is going on? The two had reached the gates of UA only to find a huge group of reporters crowding the entranceway and accosting any poor soul brave enough to try to squeeze past them. Hey, you? How are All Might's classes? Will you tell us about what the symbol of peace is like as a teacher? I would like to speak directly with All Might. How would you rate All Might compared to your other teachers at UA? Just a little time is fine. Just let me see All Might. Oh, geez. It was going to be a nightmare to try to get through this. They were going to be late for class, weren't they? He sighed and turned to Hagakure. Do you think there might be a back entrance we could take? He stopped mid-sentence. Hagakure was grinning cheekily at him. What's that look on your face? Do you have an idea? Hagakure looked surprised for a moment, then schooled her features. Oh right, she probably wasn't used to Izuku being able to see her. I have an idea, yeah. Her school uniform turned invisible once again, and she offered her hand to him. Take my hand. Okay. Izuku grabbed her hand and then was shocked to see his arm vanish. He whipped his head around. It wasn't just his arm, his whole body was invisible, clothes and backpack and all. Wow. You can make other things invisible too. Wait, of course you can, you've been doing it with your clothes. But you can extend it to other people? Yup, she said smugly. I just learned how to do it recently. When I was younger I couldn't extend my invisibility at all. It's a good thing, too. Otherwise, I couldn't use a hero costume and I'd have to do all my heroics in the nude. Izuku mentally scoffed at the thought. As if. I'm sure Ua could have made you an invisible costume. A lot of heroes have costumes made with DNA-infused fabrics so that it works with their quirks. She shrugged. Sure, but then it would be invisible all the time, like me. This way I can turn it on and off. Anyway, we're wasting time. Let's go. Right. Izuku expected Hagakure to circle the perimeter of the crowd, but instead she dragged him right into the middle of it. The heck? He was about to ask her what she was doing, but the words died on his lips when he saw Hagakure weave through the crowd like it was nothing. With astonishing grace and dexterity, Hagakure slipped through gaps seemingly way too small for her, dipping and pivoting around the reporters without even grazing them. It was hypnotizing to watch. In contrast, Izuku was a giant klutz bumping into everyone as he tried his best to copy Hagakure's movements. Several reporters looked around confused when he bumped into them, but since they didn't see anything they dismissed it. No wonder Hagakure was able to escape his grip in the battle trial yesterday. She was incredible. This was what a real hero was like. This was the caliber of skill expected from students of UA. He had to step it up if he wanted to keep pace with his classmates. Breaking through the crowd, the two passed the gates and officially entered the grounds of UA. They could walk normally again. Izuku reddened a bit when he realized they were still holding hands. Oh, this would be a delicate procedure. If he let go of her hand too fast then it'd be rude, like he was a boy who still believed in cooties. He let go as gingerly and naturally as he could, and he became visible again. Hagakure was strutting along obviously pleased with herself. She should be. That was crazy back there. I'd compare you to a ninja, but frankly, I think ninjas have nothing on you. He gushed. You're amazing, Hagakure. How'd you even learn to do that? She puffed out her chest a little. I've had a lot of practice. I've always wanted to be a hero, but there's only so much you can do with just invisibility. I've had to make it count. With just invisibility. Sorry, I've kind of been avoiding the topic because of what happened yesterday, Izuku said cautiously, but what do you mean by just invisibility? You're like ridiculously strong. You blew a hole in the ceiling. I mean, you hurt yourself doing it, but still. Do you have 2 quirks? I've never heard of anybody with 2 quirks. She was a bit flustered. That part of my quirk came later. A lot later. Just recently. That's why I don't know how to use it without hurting myself yet. I don't have 2 quirks, it's part of my invisibility. Izuku was flummoxed. It's part of your invisibility. Are you sure? Yeah, she pulled herself together. It turns out I actually have a stockpiler quirk. My invisibility is caused by my body absorbing light into itself. Basically, all through my life, all of the light that touched me was being collected by my quirk and stored as a well of energy. I'm a solar-powered hero. She pumped her fist. Problem is, I have a lifetime's worth of power stored within me, so it's dangerous for me to use right now. Oh, wow, that's so cool. Yeah, I see why you need to be careful with it. But that's an incredible quirk. Izuku's eyes gleamed. Hey, in the future you'll have a built-in excuse to take vacations in tropical resorts. I need to recharge my quirk. That's a nice benefit. Hagakure chuckled politely at his lame joke. Izuku's brain was running wild with the possibilities. Was there any energy loss over time, or was her stockpile only drained when using her super strength? Did she have to convert it to strength, or could she emit it back into the world as light, like a laser beam? How far was she from her max capacity? And how long would her current stockpile last, anyway? He supposed it would depend on the efficiency of the solar conversion and how much she used at a time. Hold on, I don't get it, Izuku said. How is your quirk extracting energy from light without affecting the light itself? Like, when light is absorbed, it makes things darker. But for you, it seems like light is passing straight through you, or maybe bending around you. I don't see how your quirk is collecting energy from light without compromising your invisibility. Hagakure froze. It's what the doctors told me, so it's probably true, right? I mean, quirks are bullshit, you know. Izuku thought about it for another moment. Wait, sorry, I'm being dumb, he groaned. Visible light is only a tiny part of the electromagnetic spectrum. We're exposed to a lot more light than what we see. Like, the sun emits a bunch of ultraviolet light. Your quirk is probably absorbing the spectrums we can't see while letting visible light pass through or something. Why yeah, that makes sense. Look, at the moment, I'm more worried about not blowing myself up than the exact mechanisms of it all. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Izuku nodded and continued on anyway. I think you should look into it in the future. Normal quirk counselors don't have the facilities to test for exotic quirk effects, but UA sure does. The teachers could set you up for some quirk testing where you get exposed to different electromagnetic frequencies and see how they affect you. Who knows, you might find out something crazy like you're immune to gamma radiation or whatever. Hagakure paused and seemed to think about it. Yeah, you're right, I think I will do that. Thank you. She relaxed a bit and smirked at him. You're really into this sort of thing, aren't you? He grinned. Guilty as charged. My own quirk is stupidly complicated and it's taken a lot of time and effort to figure it out. You should see the multiple notebooks I've written on it. I think I'll take you up on that. At last, the two of them arrived at the doors of Class 1A. If there was one downside to how massive the school was, it was that it took a while to get anywhere. Izuku pushed open the doors and smiled. Day 3 at UA, and he was sure this day would be a good one. Third time's the charm. Let's get down to homeroom business, Aizawa drawled. You will be taking part in an important activity this morning, one that will impact your school life for the rest of your time at UA. Izuku squeezed his fists in dread. The suspense in the room was palpable. Choosing a class representative. Oh, come on. The tension released like air from a balloon. Then the chatter began in earnest. I want to be class representative. Pick me. Me too. I want to do it. It's a job made for moi. I'll be the leader. Let me do it. Me. Aizawa used the distraction to collapse to the floor and zip up his sleeping bag. Silence, please. Iida thundered over the din, vigorous arm movements punctuating his command. The class representative's responsibility is to lead others. It is not a job for just anyone who wants to do it. It is a calling that requires the trust of those around you. He swept his gaze across the room. I propose we hold an election. We haven't known each other for that long, so how could we have trust or anything? Kirishima pointed out the obvious issue. Won't everyone just vote for themselves? Hold on, before that, are we sure everyone actually wants to be class representative? Honanuki asked. You need to be really organized, and you'll have to go to a lot of meetings, and it's just a whole bunch of extra work in general. Who here has, like, the aptitude and spare time needed to take on the job while also keeping up with our hero work? That put a real damper on things. Students looked at each other awkwardly as they realized the responsibility they'd have to take on if they got the role. Was it really worth it? Yes, we should still all want to do it, Ribbit, Asui proclaimed confidently into the silence of the classroom. That extra work is proof of your capability. It proves that you're a leader and that you won't shirk from responsibility. It shows that you have the trust of other soon-to-be heroes, Ribbit. When we graduate, it's the type of thing hero agencies will look for that distinguishes you from everyone else. She looked around the class, meeting everyone's eyes with her own. We're all students of UA. If you're not striving to go plus ultra, then why are you here? A beat of silence, and then the room erupted again. Pick me. I'll be a great leader. You can all trust me. I can do it. Izuku noticed that Honanuki looked annoyed. His comment was a ploy to try to lessen the competition, but Asui cut through the bullshit. Nice try, man. That kind of hustle wasn't Izuku's thing, but he could respect the strategy behind it. Izuku raised his hand. Hey, everyone. People continued shouting over each other. Excuse me, guys. It eventually got quiet enough that Izuku could say his piece. How about we just make it a rule that we can't vote for ourselves? Someone could check the votes to make sure no one cheats. I am opposed to that, Iida bellowed. The secret ballot is an essential aspect of democracy. Absent the privacy of a secret ballot, voters can be influenced by intimidation, bribery, and blackmail. As heroes, we must uphold the social pillars of our nation at all times. Dude, it's a class election, Juru deadpanned. That is entirely besides the point. Uraraka spoke up. It would work if we had someone neutral to count the votes, right? Maybe Sensei could. Aizawa interrupted with a loud, exaggerated snore. Okay, maybe not. She shrunk back down in her seat. This is going nowhere. Just give the role to me, I can do it. No way. I'd do a way better job. As if, Asui raised her hand. I have a suggestion. The whole class quieted to listen to her. We can combine both approaches, Ribbit. First, we can choose to publicly nominate someone other than ourselves, and then at the end, we all anonymously vote for one of the nominated candidates. Does that work for everyone? There was a wave of murmured agreement. It was probably the best that they were going to get, and Iida didn't make a fuss about it either. Silence settled over the classroom as everyone waited to see who would be the first person to speak up and nominate someone. Izuku said. I guess I'll get the kind of obvious one out of the way? I nominate Asui. She seems to know what she's doing. She ribbited softly. Thank you, Midoriya. Also, Izuku continued. Are we allowed to nominate more than one person? The class pondered the question. I don't think so, Yaoyorozu eventually said. That leaves open the opportunity for some joker to nominate the whole class, and then we'd be right back to where we started. Kaminari leaned back in his chair and smirked. Yep, I'd totally do that. We're looking for someone smart and organized, right? Hagakure spoke up. All right, so I nominate Midoriya. Izuku was startled. Me? Yup. When I looked through your notebook earlier, it was literally just checklist after checklist. Pages and pages of it. I don't know anyone who writes checklists for fun. You'll be perfect for the job. Izuku was caught up on her first sentence. Wait, when did you look through my notebook? You told me I should look at your notebooks, she said playfully. That was less than 10 minutes ago. Ow. It was true. Curse her invisibility. Let me see, Shiro said next to him, grabbing Izuku's notebook off his desk. Hey, oh damn, it's true. It really is all checklists, Shiro marveled, flipping through the pages. He stopped and read some of it. What the heck are you writing in here? This one just says, Ririri. Izuku's face burned. Give it back. Ririri. Shiro mocked. I dunno, guys. Maybe Midoriya is organized, but all he's writing is nonsense. Does that really count? Izuku snatched his notebook back from Shiro and hurriedly shoved it in his backpack. Ashido giggled and then spoke up. Hey, so if we're going for someone smart and organized, then I nominate Yaomomo. She got first place on the written exam and she's a recommended student, so she's the smartest of anyone here. Yaoyorozu blushed. I wouldn't say that. Knowledge is not the same as intelligence. I appreciate your endorsement, however. I'm a recommended student too, Honanuki mumbled, but nobody paid attention to him. Excuse me, Kodai said quietly, raising her hand. She had a very soft voice. I would like to nominate Rin Hirayu. He escorted me through the crowd of reporters earlier by making himself all spiky. Oh. Rin scratched the back of his head nervously. I mean, it's what anyone would have done, right? But you were the one who did it, she insisted. Rin was very sweet and considerate, and he helped me feel safe. That's what we all should want from a leader. Rin spluttered and his face turned entirely red. It didn't look like he'd be capable of coherent speech for a bit. I nominate myself. Katsuki boomed, interrupting the sweet moment. I'll do a better job than any of these losers. You can't nominate yourself, you moron, Hagakure said. Sure I can. I know I'm the best person here. Just because you guys don't recognize greatness doesn't change the facts. Bakugo has a bit of a point, Honanuki mused. Hey, no, stop looking at me like that, you guys. Listen. What I mean is that none of us really know each other, so someone fit for the role might not be nominated because none of us know about them. Maybe we can do speeches or something to try to persuade someone to nominate us? That is a very perceptive observation. I completely agree, Iida bellowed. I shall begin. My esteemed classmates, I humbly request your support as your potential class representative. I offer a steadfast dedication to upholding the rules and principles that define this great institution. I believe that. No way, Iida. Not gonna happen, interrupted Jiru. You're bad enough already. I don't want you to have actual authority over us. Oof. It was true, but she shouldn't say it. Iida deflated and sat back down. The classroom was quiet as everyone awkwardly looked at each other waiting for the next person to make their speech. It seemed that Jiru had killed the initiative. No one was willing to ask to be nominated and risk being mocked for it. Yaoyorozu spoke up. Is that everyone, then? Our 4 nominees are Asui, Midoriya, Rin, and myself? There were indistinct murmurs around the classroom, but nobody seemed to disagree. All right, then. Yaoyorozu used her quirk to create a ballot box and 20 identical blank voting cards which were then handed around the class. Everyone, please write down the name of the person you're voting for and add your card to the box when you're done. Upon receiving his card, Izuku wrote down his own name and inserted it into the voting box. The box was passed around the class until everyone had voted, and then it was collected by Yaoyorozu at the front of the class. Hold on, why is Yaoyorozu counting the votes? Rin said. She's a candidate. Isn't that a conflict of interest? Indeed, Iida declared. I shall tally the. Kirishima will count the votes, Ashido said brightly. Huh? Me? Kirishima was startled. Why me? Why not you? Ashido retorted, still smiling. He looked around aimlessly. Okay. Iida fumed in his seat as Kirishima went up to the front of the class and emptied the box of votes. He wrote the names of the 4 candidates on the whiteboard and started adding tally marks after the names for each vote. He paused upon reaching one of the votes, then rolled his eyes. Bakugo, dude, you weren't nominated, you can't vote for yourself. Don't tell me what I can't do. Shitty hair. Kirishima brushed him off and asked the class at large, so, do we make him vote again or just ignore his vote? I'm not voting for any of those losers. Hey, how about this, Kaminari said. Give his vote to one of the other 4 at random. You know, spice up the election with a little RNG. No. Katsuki shouted. There's no way that I'll let my vote go to Deku. Who's Deku? Someone in the class wondered quietly. Katsuki growled. Fine, whatever. I vote for Frogger. Asui turned to look at him. My name is Asui Suyu. Does it look like I care, Frogger? Asui stared at Katsuki for a few moments, her wide eyes gazing into him. She then turned back to the front of the class and looked at Kirishima. I don't want his vote. I don't think you need it anyway, Kirishima said. He'd continued tallying up the votes while Katsuki was busy bickering with the class. He stepped away from the whiteboard and revealed the results. Asui, Mido, Rin, Yao. All right, so, Asui is class representative no matter who gets Bakugo's vote, Kirishima said. I guess Yaoyorozu is vice representative unless Bakugo creates a tie by voting for Midoriya. I already told you, I'm not voting for Deku. No, seriously, who's Deku? Katsuki facepalmed and groaned into his hand. I'm not voting for Izuku. Right, cool, so we're done here, Kirishima said in relief. Our class representative is Asui and our vice representative is Yaoyorozu. Woo, woo, woo. Go, Sue. I was rooting for you to win, Ashido cheered. Didn't you nominate Yaoyorozu? Does it matter? There was scattered applause as Asui and Yaoyorozu walked to the front and turned to face the class. Thank you all for putting your trust in us, Ribbit. Asui bowed. We promise to live up to your expectations. Yaoyorozu bowed as well. God, you kids are so noisy, Aizawa grumbled. Chapter text. The cafeteria bustled with adolescents and chatter. With morning classes behind them, friends gathered around the lunch tables, eagerly sharing food and stories. Students joked around, discussed the year so far, and indulged in random gossip. For the first time in years, Izuku did not sit at a table alone, because he had friends. Hey, Mido, my man, Kaminari said, punching Izuku's shoulder as he sat down next to him. Too bad about the class representative thing. You were just one vote away from being vice. I did my part, Hagakure said, sitting across from him. Next to her sat Uraraka. Better luck next time. A wobbly smile bloomed across Izuku's face. So, you two voted for me? Kaminari and Hagakure nodded, and so my third vote was from. That was me. Uraraka said cheerfully, waving her hand in the air. Guess it was just us though. How could he express that he was already so unbelievably grateful that he had 3 friends willing to vote for him that it didn't matter that no one else did? This was the first time he'd ever had friends at all. Should he say that? No, that would be weird. Thank you so much, you guys, he said, doing his best to fight back tears. No problem, Kaminari said. I gotta ask, that notebook of yours is for your quirk, right? What does ririri mean, anyway? Oh, that. Izuku's face reddened again involuntarily. It's short for reuse recorded resolution. Kaminari tilted his head. Yeah, I don't know what that means, but you should have said that at the time, man. You didn't say anything, so Zero just made you look dumb. You could have turned it around so everyone would see that you're smart. Huh. Kaminari was totally right, wasn't he? Izuku had screwed that up. He'd instinctively felt ashamed by all the weird things he wrote, like he was still back in Aldera where everyone made fun of him for his made-up quirk. But now he was a hero student at UA, and his notebooks were valuable assets filled with legitimate hero stuff. He clearly needed more practice at this, being confident, thing. I wouldn't have beaten Asui anyway, she got twice my votes, Izuku deflected. Hagakure shrugged. Maybe not, but you could have beaten Yaomomo. Then we'd have 2 greenies for our class reps. Uraraka nibbled on her lunch. I feel bad for Hononuki. He was trying to be subtle, but it didn't work. And, well, Iida wasn't trying to be subtle, and it also didn't work. Day 3 is kind of too early to make this decision. Like, I nominated Asui without thinking too much about it, Izuku admitted. Sorry about that, Hagakure. You nominated me but I couldn't nominate you in return. Peeved. Don't worry about it. A mischievous gleam entered Hagakure's eyes. By the way, Midoriya, she said with a tone of innocence. Please, call me Toru. After all, you did give birth to me. Izuku choked on his food. Kaminari's and Uraraka's heads whipped back and forth between the two of them. Okay, what in joke am I missing here? Kaminari asked. He'd been caught off guard, but Izuku got the joke. What now? Right, this was friendly banter. This is what friends did. He would play along. Sure, as your father, call me Izuku. Calling my father by his given name? Nah, I'll call you Daddy. Never mind, playing along was a terrible mistake. Please don't do that, he begged, but Toru was already cackling. Uraraka leaned over and fake whispered to Kaminari, you think they're going to explain, or will they just leave us in the dark? Pretend you don't care. Reverse psychology and all that, Kaminari whispered back. Toru was still chortling away. She was way too proud of herself. Izuku rolled his eyes and turned to his other 2 friends. You know how Toru hurt herself at the exercise yesterday. I healed her, in a way. I can use my quirk to make save points, so I did it by reloading a save from before the battle trial started. So, it's possible, maybe, that my quirk recreated her, so. I'm a new me, Toru chirped. Yeah, Izuku finished lamely. Oh, wow, you were being way more literal than I expected. Kaminari threw his arm around Izuku's shoulder. So, how's it feel to be a father at your age? Izuku groaned. Don't you start now. The girls both laughed at his suffering. Kaminari grinned. Seriously, though, it's going to be weird if only you two are calling each other by your given names. Call me Denki. Call me Ochako. Izuku smiled. Hi, Denki. Hi, Ochako. A thought came to his mind. We're in heroics, so all of our classmates are people we'll eventually have to trust with our lives. I think we'll all become close sooner or later. Guess we're just doing it sooner. Look at us, one big happy family, Toru said. By the way, Toru, Izuku said. I'm sorry for bringing this up again, but, in the video that Principal Nedzu showed you, it must have included the very end, right? You mean the part in the infirmary? Yeah, what of it? Izuku swallowed. So, you're okay with what I told you then? Am I okay that the old me was killed and I'm just a replacement, Toru? Yup, no problem at all, she said with a laugh. Was she being sarcastic? It didn't seem like it, but he wasn't sure. Denki and Ochako were both staring at her like they couldn't tell if this was another joke or not. Toru sighed. I'm serious. Izuku, dude, I get where you're coming from, but you're way overthinking this. By your logic, every single moment of every day we're continuously murdering the person we were a second ago. After all, they don't exist anymore, right? The me that just said that sentence is dead now. The only things that are real are snapshots of the present. Toru waved her hands around. Yeah, sure, your quirk makes things confusing because you're reordering cause and effect in a way our brains aren't used to. Like the me that exists right now originates from before the me that a past version of you remembers once knowing. But when you zoom out, every moment always has a me, and I'm still me in the present, the same as I've always been. I feel fine, so what's the problem? Well, that was one way of looking at it. And she accuses me of overthinking this. Izuku thought, bewildered. That's good. I'm happy to hear that. That's deep, Denki said. Tilting his head, he continued, well, I think it is. It sounded deep, at least. He faced forward. Hey, Ochako. Please don't tell me you're a smarty pants like these two. I don't want to be the only dumb friend here. Ochako giggled. You're not alone. Dumb friends unite. They high-fived over the lunchroom table. Did Denki say that as a joke, or was he secretly insecure like Izuku was? Man, being social was going to be so much easier once he stopped having to overanalyze every interaction. You're not dumb. No one here is dumb. Like, we all passed the written part of the entrance exam. Anyone who passed that nightmare of a test isn't allowed to call themselves dumb. Like a synchronized performance, all three of his friends threw back their heads and groaned. Don't remind me of that test, man. I thought I failed before even getting to the physical exam. I was keeping track. I couldn't have gotten better than 60%, Ochako ed. But All Might praised me for getting a great score in my acceptance video. What did they want from us? Complaining about school. Truly the most universal teenage bonding experience. The mood lightened as the four of them continued to chat, jumping from topic to topic without any real purpose, enjoying spending time with each other. It was so nice to have friends. Toru, can we talk quickly? There were only a few minutes left on their lunch break. Izuku caught up to Toru when she started heading back to class. Sure, what's up? Right, how should he explain this? I know you said you were fine with me reverting you yesterday, but there's more to it. As long as my quirk is tracking you, I can theoretically use it on you whenever. Like, right now, if I wanted to, I could send you back to right before the battle trial, and you'd forget the last day. Not that I'd do that. I wouldn't, but unless I specifically untrack you, I could. I just haven't untracked you yet because then I wouldn't be able to see you anymore, but that's kind of a dumb reason. So, I figured I should probably untrack you, unless you think otherwise. You wouldn't be able to see me anymore, she said quietly. Then she spoke in a normal tone of voice. I still need to practice using my strength without hurting myself. Not that I want to rely on you, but it might not be a bad idea to have a failsafe in case I destroy my bones again. So, I don't mind you using your quirk on me. Izuku hesitated. I don't think, are you really sure about that? What, you think I can't make my own decisions? No, that's not what. Relax, Toru interrupted. Sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I don't like thinking about what would have happened if you weren't able to heal me yesterday. She rubbed her arm unconsciously. And also, well, I don't mind. It's fine. Izuku bit his lip. Right. Well, the alternative is maybe I can make a save point of you every day, so even if the worst happens you'd never lose more than a day, and likely not even that much. He put a hand to his chin and thought about it more carefully. Technically I wouldn't be making a proper commit, because then you'd be reset if I switch away from my current branch and switch back, so instead I guess I'd restage you every day. Although that means I can't revert you to earlier than the most recent restage, but you wouldn't want that anyway, and I'd need to unstage you before making any other commit so that you're not included by accident, so maybe I can make a throwaway branch that only tracks you, make a single commit there, and then I can cherry pick from the branch later. Sorry, you don't understand a word I'm saying. Nope. But it sounds like you do, and that's what matters. So, how does that work? Should we meet every morning so you can make a backup me? No, my Quirk works remotely. So I just do it in my own time. Once I'm tracking something, I can do whatever I want to it, whenever I want. That's how I summon things to me, and stuff. Oh. She stared at him in thought. Does that include making things disappear, like the zero pointer? Yes. He swallowed and had to look away. Toru was silent for a long time. Dude, your Quirk is scary, she said eventually. Look, this is why I wanted to untrack you, Izuku exclaimed. No, she looked him in the eyes. It's fine. I trust you. Her mouth twitched like she couldn't decide whether to smile or frown. No point in not trusting you, frankly. You can change your mind whenever, just let me know, anytime, and I'll stop. Sure. If I do, I'll let you know. Now, come on already. Class is gonna start any minute and who knows what Aizawa will do if we're late. Right, okay. That could have gone worse, he supposed. It was late evening. The sun had already set. The surroundings were illuminated only by a waning glow at the horizon. Izuku was at the local park carrying a small bag containing stuff that he'd scrounged up from around his apartment. Scissors, a roll of string, and a package of small S-shaped hook hangers. He didn't mean for it to get this late. At Aldera, he could get most of his homework done during the school day, but the accelerated schedule at UA, due to half the school day being devoted to hero training, meant that between school, training, exercise, homework, dinner, and other various chores he found himself with very little free time. He wasn't used to this. Regardless, he had a Quirk experiment planned for tonight, and he was damn well going to do it. On the bright side, the park was empty this late at night, so he wouldn't get in trouble for public Quirk use. One aspect of his Quirk that he'd failed to take advantage of so far was multiple degrees of relativity. When he added an item to his Quirk, by default the virtual object would exist in a static, unchanging position relative to the Earth's rotation. But if he added an object while it was touching another object that he had previously added to his Quirk, then the virtual object would exist relative to the object it was touching. That was how he summoned items to himself. While he couldn't anchor objects to his own body, because he couldn't add himself to his Quirk, he could anchor objects to his clothes, which was pretty much the same thing in most circumstances. But that was only one degree of relativity. One object was anchored to the Earth, and a second object was anchored to the first object. What if he kept going? What if he added a third object relative to the second, a fourth relative to the third, and so on? Were there any interesting things he could do with that? Leaving the park's walking trail, he dropped everything he was carrying in an open grassy plain. What should this test be called? Git Switch C Project Skyward String, he decided. Getting to work, he reached a hand into the air and then measured out a length of string that matched the distance between the ground and the tips of his fingers. He cut about 10 lengths of string and tied the ends of the first piece to 2 hooks. All right, so to create a chain of relative positions, the order in which he added the objects mattered. He left one hook on the ground. Git add hook. He then picked up the other hook and held it as high into the air as he could reach. Git add string. Git add hook. With the virtual objects now in place, he could relax his arms and make a commit of this setup. Git commit M. Step 1 of project Skyward String. Git tag S1. By tagging this commit with the name S1, he could easily refer back to it later. Izuku picked up the next piece of string he'd prepared and tied it to the second hook. He then picked up a third hook, tied it to the other end of the string, and held it in the air as far as he could reach. Git add string. Git add hook. Because he was only touching one set of items at a time, it was fine that all of these objects had the names string or hook, because touching the item made it clear which one he was referring to. Git commit M. Step 2. Git tag S2. Here was Izuku's idea. Usually, Izuku could never anchor an object to somewhere he'd never been in the first place. He could hold a hook above his head, and that was the highest that the hook could be. If he reached into the air, saved a commit, and then applied the commit, then the hook would reappear at that same elevation before falling to the ground. But if each hook was saved relative to a previous hook, then the height would be determined by the elevation of the previous hook in the sequence. Usually, objects had to be touching to anchor them to each other, but that was what the string was for. A hook was anchored to a strand of string, which was anchored to another hook, which was anchored to another piece of string, which was anchored to a third hook. In theory, he could apply each commit in sequence, and each hook's height would compound on the previous one. The first would appear 6 feet in the air, the second would appear 6 plus 6 equals 12 feet in the air, the next hook 18 feet in the air, and so on, not accounting for gravity pulling the whole thing downward at the same time. It didn't necessarily have to go straight upward either, because it was all relative to the initial anchor on the ground that he could angle in whatever direction he wanted. Strands of string connected each of these hooks, thus, Project Skyward String. It was like an extendable grappling hook, except way more finicky, and much stupider. This was just to test the theory. Nothing that he was doing tonight would be directly practical for hero work. Izuku repeated the same process of tying the hooks together, holding one in the air, committing its relative position, and then continuing on to the next one until he had finished assembling his long piece of rope made of 10 strands of string linked by hooks. He'd tagged each commit in sequence with a step number, S1, S2, etc. Now he had to rapidly check out each tag one after the other. Git checkout S1. Note: switching to S1, you are in detached head state. You can look around, make experimental changes and commit them, and you can discard any commits you make in this state without impacting any branches by switching back to a branch. If you want to create a new branch to retain commits you create, you may do so, now or later, by using C with the switch command. Example: git switch C less than new branch name greater than head is now at 51E0E step 1 of Project Skyward String. A warning message immediately appeared in his mind's eye. The heck? Behind the warning, he saw that the first hook appeared 6 feet in the air, the string hanging down below it, before immediately falling back to the ground once gravity caught up. He wasn't really paying attention because he was distracted by the warning. What had gone wrong? Oh, it was this stupid warning again. Izuku facepalmed. He forgot about this. It happened whenever he switched to anything that wasn't the most recent commit in a branch, and it was really annoying. It didn't have anything to do with his experiment, it was just a bother that he'd have to put up with. All right, now that he knew what to expect, it was time to try again. This time he'd ignore the warning and keep reciting commands like he meant to do. Git switch main. That reset the experiment so that he could apply the first commit again. Git checkout S1. Oh my god, go away. Izuku's mind was being swarmed by pop-ups. Behind all the pop-ups, it looked like his idea was actually working. The string had been lifted about 15 feet in the air, and Izuku could have kept going to lift it higher, but he didn't bother continuing. The string and hooks fell to the ground with a quiet clang. This wasn't workable. Imagine if he were facing a villain, and then he got blindsided by a whole bunch of overlapping pop-ups appearing in his mind. He couldn't afford to be distracted or waste time closing pop-ups when he needed to focus on fighting villains or saving people. Ow. This was so stupid. He didn't need the warning, so why was his quirk insisting on it? Was there an alternative way to do this that wouldn't result in the pop-up? Izuku put a hand to his chin and considered the problem. The issue that the message was complaining about was that, by switching to arbitrary commits, he was going back in time, and so any changes he made would be ignored in favor of the most recent commit made to the branch. To fix that, instead of swapping between commits in the commit history, he needed a way to apply the changes that were made in one commit to his current state. That would keep everything in a nice, linear timeline. He thought about it for a while. He'd been using his quirk for nearly a year now. It shouldn't be too hard to think of a command that would do what he needed. Eventually, he nodded to himself. He had an idea. Git switch main, he said to reset everything. Git diff s1. This command meant, show me the difference between my current state and the commit, s1. A holographic hook and string appeared in his view, hovering in midair where he had raised in over his head. However, unlike usual virtual objects, these had distinct green outlines around them. At the same time, the physical hook and string lying on the ground had visible red outlines around them. The diff command showed a visual preview of what had changed between commits. The old version was shown in red while the new version was shown in green. Thus, this was saying, these objects, currently in this red position here, will move to this green position here if the commit is applied. By itself, this wouldn't solve Izuku's issue. It was just a visual preview, not the actual thing. But diff had a secret extra feature. You could save the difference between two things as its own item, called a patch, by the manual, and then apply that patch to turn the preview into reality. Git diff s1 greater than p1. This created the patch object, which he called p1. Now to apply it. Git apply p1. The hook teleported 6 feet into the air, pulling one end of the string along with it, and then fell to the ground. The result was exactly the same as the previous test, except this time there was no stupid warning message getting in his face. Woo. Geez, his quirk took so much effort to do anything. Izuku spent the next several minutes creating patch objects for the differences between each of the tagged commits, labeled P1 through P10. This whole test was turning into a bit of a hassle, but hopefully it would be worth it. Done. All right. It would work this time. Git apply P1. The hook teleported into the air and began to fall. Git apply P2. The second hook also teleported upward, but the first hook had already nearly fallen to the ground, so at best the second hook only got up to 7 feet in the air. Git apply P3, Izuku said as quickly as he could. The third hook continued the pattern, teleporting into the air but not gaining any meaningful height because the hook that it was anchored to had already nearly reached the ground thanks to gravity. Izuku stopped. He literally couldn't speak fast enough for this to work. But, this didn't make any sense. During his first test, he saw the structure reach at least 15 feet in the air. He only stopped because the pop-ups were bothering him. He wasn't speaking the commands any faster than the previous time. Shouldn't applying a commit and applying a patch of that commit do the same thing? He didn't get it. What had changed? Izuku fiddled with the pile of string by his feet, thinking through the problem carefully. A patch of a commit only included the change that was introduced in that commit itself. Whereas if he checked out a commit directly, then that also included the history that led up to that commit. The difference between them was that a commit was an event within a timeline, whereas a patch was an event unrelated to anything else. So, in his first experiment, he wasn't speaking the commands any faster than his second time. That meant that the hooks must have been falling at the same rate, but for some reason, it didn't affect the height of the structure. The only thing that made sense was that each time he checked out a commit, it reapplied all the commits that had led up to that point since it was part of a timeline, and by definition, a timeline had to include everything that had happened. Was there a command that he could use to sequentially apply all the commits on a timeline all at once? Oh my god, I am so dumb. If this worked, he was going to be so mad. Well, he'd be happy, but he'd also be so mad. Izuku took a few steps back from the pile of string and hooks on the ground. Git switch main, he said to reset the experiment for hopefully the last time. Now for the moment that would prove whether or not he was the stupidest person on the planet. Git switch project skyward string. In an instant, the string sprung skyward. For a brief moment, the structure of string and hooks reached about 50 feet into the air before gravity reasserted itself and it all fell back to the ground. It worked. Switching to a branch meant to jump to the most recent point on some given timeline. In order to get to the end of a timeline, everything that was included in that timeline had to have happened as well, because that's what a timeline was. All of it was applied at once. And since each hook was relative to the previous hook, the heights between them added to each other until the whole thing reached 50+ feet into the air. Man, Izuku wished he could feel proud of himself. His experiment was objectively a success, but he was still berating himself for his tunnel vision. If he forgot how branches worked, then what other incredibly obvious things was he forgetting about right now? Right on cue, the waning sunset finally surrendered to the dark. The faint glow at the horizon had just faded enough that Izuku's night vision could no longer keep up. The park was illuminated only by distant street lamps and the gentle nighttime starlight. Izuku looked around the park he was in, barely able to see anything around him. What the hell was he doing flouting public quirk laws in a random park in the middle of the night? He was a UA student. UA had entire facilities devoted to quirk training. He could be doing all this with proper equipment and a whole staff of pro heroes ready to help him with anything he needed. Just earlier this morning he had recommended to Toru that she should take advantage of UA's facilities to find how her body reacted to different light frequencies. Izuku's head fell into his hands, ashamed and embarrassed over his absolute stupidity. He could blame the oversight on habit. After all, he'd been experimenting on his own for most of the previous year. It made sense that it might not immediately cross his mind that he didn't need to do everything alone anymore. That explanation didn't quite ring true to him, though. Izuku stared up at the night sky. It was a new moon, but the sky was bright. The starlight shone with unusual intensity. He could almost picture the rays of starlight shining down around him. He held up his hand, palm facing upward. He imagined a ray of starlight striking his palm. Git add starlight. Oh, shit. That worked. Why did that work? Izuku continued to stare up at the universe, not sure what to do next. Git diff. The night sky burst into a kaleidoscope of reds and greens. His quirk was trying to show him how the starlight had changed since he added it a few seconds ago, whatever that meant. The diff starlight was brighter than the normal night sky. Was it because the diff collected all of the starlight that had been emitted since he added it, shining all at once? Cumulative light. He was reminded of how Toru's quirk gathered and stored light that passed through her, converting it into energy. Git diff greater than starlight. Now he had some concentrated starlight stored as a patch object that he could use to briefly brighten the night sky in the future. Not that he had any earthly idea why he'd use it. Izuku didn't entirely lack self-awareness. Why had he spent so much time tonight screwing around with compounding relative motion and diff patches and all the rest of it? He knew why. He recognized that the reason he was so interested in all these exotic, finicky usages for his quirk was because it helped distract him from the big, obvious, dangerous, horrifying things he could do instead. There was a reason why he intuitively avoided doing his quirk experiments where smart, knowledgeable, helpful pro heroes could see him. He didn't want people to know exactly what he could do with his quirk, and he didn't want anyone to challenge him on what his limits actually were. It was nice to pretend that his quirk had limits. Achieving cool things by working around those limits was fun. What if, right now, he said, "Get starlight"? Even worse, what if he said, "Get earth"? He would never dare do it. He would never dare try it. Dude, your quirk is scary, Toru had said earlier today. She didn't know the half of it. Izuku loved his life right now. He was having so much fun. He loved experimenting and pushing the limits of his abilities. He was a student at UA. He was going to be a hero. He had friends that he liked and who liked him in return. He was happy. He wouldn't trade what he had right now for anything in the world. He was so grateful for everything his quirk had granted him. But deep in his heart, in a dark place that he never wanted to admit aloud, he knew the truth. He was so scared of his quirk. Chapter text today was rescue training. Earlier that morning, Aizawa announced that they'd be going on a field trip. Class 1A was promptly herded onto a bus bound for a facility that specialized in simulating disaster scenarios, fires, earthquakes, flooding, and everything in between. Additionally, 2 special guest teachers would meet them there. This wasn't a surprise to any of the students. Apparently, they were actually supposed to do rescue training last week, but it was delayed because the class had to redo the battle trial. Class 1B had gone last week instead, and they were happy to spill the beans about everything. Izuku was so excited. The bus was filled with friendly chatter as they drove to their destination. Overall, most of the class seemed pumped, but there were a handful of exceptions. Katsuki seemed pissed that he wouldn't be able to blow anyone up today, but that was nothing new. Denki was sitting next to Izuku, and while he wasn't obvious about it, Izuku could tell that Denki was a little stiff. Shooting lightning was a very combat-focused quirk, and there weren't many obvious ways to use it for rescue. He could understand why Denki was a little nervous. Izuku considered pointing out that pro heroes had to deal with situations that their quirks didn't help with all the time, but it was clear Denki was trying to pretend that everything was fine, so calling him out on it was probably a bad idea. Ribbit. Excuse me, Hagakure. Toru had been watching the scenery pass by out the window, but she turned back to face her classmates. What's up, Asui? I mean, Ms. President, she teased. My friends call me Sue, so everyone here can call me that. Sure thing, Sue. What's up? Sue looked at Toru with wide eyes. I tend to speak what's on my mind. I hope I don't come across as rude. She paused to see if Toru would object, then continued. You appear to have two quirks. Both invisibility and strength that rivals All Might's. I didn't know it was possible for someone to have two quirks. Huh? Sue asked almost exactly the same thing Izuku had last week. Well, it was no surprise. Toru's abilities seemed completely unrelated to each other from the outside. He wondered if Toru had asked the teachers yet about setting up some advanced quirk testing. It'd be a huge benefit if she knew exactly which electromagnetic frequencies her quirk could convert to stored power. Maybe she'd talk about it now. Toru still hadn't said anything. She was biting her lip and looking mildly panicked. Sue continued to stare at her calmly. What was going on? Did she get nervous in front of crowds? Should he step in and help her explain? Or maybe she wanted to keep that aspect of her quirk secret for some reason? Maybe Toru learned some drawback to her quirk, like she was weaker in the dark, and she didn't want that weakness exposed. Izuku wanted to help his friend, but he didn't know what was wrong. In the end, he didn't have to do anything because Ashido stepped in and accidentally bailed Toru out. Girl, what are you talking about? Aren't there a bunch of people who have more than one quirk? Sue put a finger to her mouth. No, Ribbit. It can appear that way, but it always comes down to multiple expressions of a single quirk. No way. Kirishima butted in. Then how do you explain Midoriya and all the weird things he can do? Sue's gaze turned to Izuku. Oh, wow. Her stare was intense. Suddenly he understood why Toru had gotten nervous. Izuku hadn't done anything wrong, but those big wide eyes staring into his soul made him feel like he needed to repent for every time he'd ever snuck an extra piece of candy when his mom wasn't looking. She eventually turned back to Kirishima. I don't know what Midoriya's quirk is. It makes no sense. Harsh, but fair. Endeavor's son in Class B has two quirks, Jiru said, twirling one of her earphone jacks around her finger. He has a fire quirk and an ice quirk. Although I hear he doesn't use his fire for some reason. You hear, or you overheard? Ojiro raised an eyebrow. Jiru frowned. Same thing. It's not on purpose. I wonder why he only uses half of his quirk. Izuku pondered aloud. He must have a reason for it. Fire and ice are opposites, so maybe they conflict with each other and make both less effective? Or he could just be bad at using fire, Denki said. Better to master one thing than to spread yourself thin across multiple things. He thought for a moment, and then his eyes widened. No offense, Izuku. He laughed. None taken. He's just an arrogant bastard who thinks he's better than everyone else because his daddy is Endeavor. Katsuki spat. If he thinks he can get away with only using half his power, then he's in for a rude awakening. I can't wait to kick his teeth in. Sue rolled her eyes. Please don't antagonize Class B, Ribbit. Katsuki leaned over his seat and stared at Sue. Does it look like I was talking to you, Frogger? He shouted, daring her to respond. Sue met his gaze easily. My friends call me Sue, so please, call me Asui. Katsuki looked like he was about to explode, but thankfully he was interrupted. Settle down, kids, Aizawa grunted. We're here. Welcome, everyone, to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or as I like to call it, the USJ. Izuku's and Ochako's eyes both widened in glee. It's the space hero, 13. It's 13, my favorite hero, they said at the same time. They both grabbed onto the shoulder of the closest person, which was Denki for both of them, and started shaking him back and forth. She's so amazing. She's rescued people from countless. Just 2 weeks ago there was a big landslide in. Such amazing control of her quirk, and wow, it was like she was able to lift the entire mountain off of. inspired so many others to go into rescue heroics. Izuku babbled into one of Denki's ears while Ochako babbled into the other. Denki's expression grew more and more befuddled as he was jerked back and forth between the two fanatics. "Somebody save me," he whispered. "I'm thrilled to see that you're all so enthusiastic," 13 exclaimed. You couldn't see her expression behind the space helmet, but she had a jovial tone of voice. "The USJ is a facility I helped design that simulates many kinds of natural disasters, from fires to floods to windstorms to shipwrecks and many more. It's amazing. This place is incredible," Ochako cheered, marveling at the view. The sheer size and scope of the facility was unreal, with some zones shrouded in a raging inferno while others were practically underwater. 13 chuckled. "I'm glad you think so because you're going to get to know this place very well over the next 3 years. In many ways, rescue heroics is heroics in its purest form. As heroes, your job is to save people, and that's what the USJ is all about." Iida raised his hand and then started talking immediately. "Sensei, I believe there is supposed to be another hero to assist us in training today. Why is it that you are the only one here?" 13 hummed. It's a mystery, isn't it?" She turned away from the students and pointed toward the fountain in the middle of the facility. "Oh, look at that, what could it be?" Izuku peered into the distance to see a big cloud of light blue fog emanating from the fountain area, quickly flowing out to fill the volume and obscure the surrounding field. It was heavy smoke, unnatural, rolling toward them across the ground and growing larger and larger. What was going on? Suddenly, something shot up and out of the clouds at great speed. It was a solid cloud carrying a person on it. The cloud circled high around the facility at impressive speeds before flying toward the group of students. Stopping on a dime, the cloud and its heroic passenger hovered in the air next to 13. It was the rescue hero Loud Cloud. Izuku barely suppressed his squeal. Loud Cloud was famous, especially by the standards of rescue heroes. His quirk allowed him to create solid clouds and control them telepathically, allowing him to transport all kinds of things with ease. His ability to create fleets of clouds to lift whole populations out of disaster zones was legendary. Looking at him now, sitting confidently atop a small cloud of his own making, Izuku was reminded of a character from their classic literature class. The class was focused on historical portrayals of heroics from ancient cultures. There was some centuries-old classic they were forced to read that was about some kid who flew around on a cloud. What was the name of that character again? Son Goku. Whatever, it was a boring book anyway. "Hey there, little heroes," Loud Cloud shouted from his seat upon his cloud. "I hope you all are ready for some action. We've got a lot planned for you today, and not much time to get to it all, so you better be prepared to go plus ultra. You could save time by sparing us the theatrics," Aizawa drawled. "Huh? Where's the fun in that, Shota?" Loud Cloud laughed, then turned back to the students. "To help with everything, we have even more special guests for you all." Loud Cloud snapped his fingers with a flourish, and then suddenly 3 more clouds with passengers launched out of the fog in the center of the facility. The clouds zipped around the facility, looping around each other in intricate patterns in the air. Trails of mist followed their paths, creating dazzling spirals and arcs. It was so cool. After completing the impromptu aerobatics demonstration, the clouds zoomed to the group and halted right before hitting the ground, gracelessly dumping off 3 older students, who looked very nauseous. Izuku stifled a laugh. The guest students clearly weren't prepared for what they had just been put through. "Behold! 3 volunteers from Class 2A, Loud Cloud announced. The older students struggled to their feet and tried to cool for their kohais. "They'll be assisting in your exercises today." Loud Cloud pointed to the first student on the left, a girl with light brown hair and doe eyes. "First up, Utsushimi Kami, the glamorous hero. Illus O Kami. Her illusion quirk will help us by creating crowds of civilians that you'll have to take into consideration, and she also has a few surprises in store that will add even more excitement to the simulated disasters." The girl struck a pose and held up a peace sign. "Thanks for having me, fams. This is going to be mad lit." Next, Loud Cloud continued. "Akatani Makumo, the garden hero. Greenheart." The student was a nervous-looking boy with messy black hair. "He can reshape organic material. Today, he'll create civilian golems for you to save." These are more lifelike than simple training dummies. Hi, Greenheart said awkwardly. Last, but not least, Loud Cloud pointed to a blonde-haired girl with fangs, Yasuda Himiko, the cosplay hero, copycat. She can transform into other people, including replicating any injuries they've sustained. She'll be helping you with diagnosing and treating injured civilians. Loud Cloud paused for a moment, then said quietly, Yasuda, these are first years, so can you please tone down the level of blood and gore in your transformations today? No promises. Copycat sing-songed. Loud Cloud grimaced but continued regardless. All right, we'll be splitting you up into 3 groups with 1 teacher and assistant each. Each group will do their exercises in a different zone. Then we'll all regroup at the end for a class activity. 13 took over. We're splitting you up for a reason. As pro heroes, you're responsible for others' lives, so you can't afford to make mistakes. At the same time, no one can experience every possible situation. Thus, learning from the personal accounts of your fellow heroes is absolutely essential. She paused for emphasis and spread her arms wide. Talk to your friends after class about their own trials today. Learn from them. Remember, you'll be coming here a lot during your time at UA. We expect you to learn from the mistakes of your classmates even if you've never personally visited a zone before. Izuku nodded solemnly. That made sense. The atmosphere had been lighthearted so far, but this was serious work they were doing. The class settled into determined stances. Looks like you're all raring to go. All right, let's get on with it. Izuku ended up in the group headed to the conflagration zone with Loud Cloud and Greenheart. Ochako was in 13's group, which she was thrilled by. He was happy for her. From the outside, the conflagration zone looked like one giant dome of fire. Upon entering, they discovered that the large dome actually had many smaller domes within it that each simulated different kinds of emergencies. Peering inside the different domes, he saw a warehouse fire, a small group of residential houses on fire, a bushfire, and others. Welcome to the flames of hell, Loud Cloud announced cheerfully. He wasn't kidding. They weren't even in any of the inner domes yet and it was already uncomfortably warm. Now, take a look at this. Loud Cloud gestured to Greenheart, who placed his hands on the ground and pulled an organic-looking mannequin out of the earth. My pal Greenheart here has formed golem dummies throughout the test environments. As you'll soon discover, they feel like real unconscious bodies. They bruise and breathe and have a heartbeat. You'll be rescuing these guys from their fiery fates. They scream too, Greenheart said. Loud Cloud kept talking. We're going to try to tackle as many of these domes as we have time for, so I'm actually going to split you up once again. You 3. He pointed at Aoyama, Juru, and Ashido. You'll start with the tower dome. You 3. He switched to pointing at Izuku, Yaoyorozu, and Kirishima. Hold tight. After I show the first group what to do, you'll head for the canyon dome. Loud Cloud sped away on his cloud with the first group following him, which was convenient because Izuku wanted to do something first. He shuffled over to Greenheart and inspected the golem dummy lying on the ground. It was breathing in and out like a living mannequin, if the mannequin also had a layer of skin over it. It was honestly pretty creepy. Hi, Greenheart, right? Izuku said, grabbing the older student's attention. Izuku had already forgotten what his real name was, but hopefully he could avoid admitting that if he used his hero name instead. Greenheart nodded in reply without saying anything. Right, I'm Midoriya Izuku, I don't have a hero name yet. He gestured at the golem Greenheart had pulled from the ground. There are golems like this all throughout the zone, right? Do you know of Pixie Bob? This looks way more advanced than her golems, but it looks like you can create them just as fast. Can you use your quirk remotely like she does? Or did you have to set this up before our class arrived? Greenheart stared at him for a while before answering quietly, I prepared them earlier, why are you asking me questions? Well, I think it's cool, this golem is really lifelike. It looks like its skin even has pores. You noticed, Greenheart beamed. It took a long time to get the texture right. It's hard to make something that feels like skin out of earth and plants and such. Talking about his work seemed to open him up a little. Izuku knelt to touch the dummy's arm. Ew, it really did feel like skin. Git ad golem, he said clearly, in full view of Greenheart. The other student didn't call him out on it, so he continued, you did a good job. It feels very close to the real thing. Thanks. It's more than just skin deep too, hey. My golems have a network of simulated nerves under the skin to detect injuries. They scream and flail to let you know when they've been hurt. Ah, they scream, huh? Izuku wasn't looking forward to that. Yup. Greenheart nodded. It's an important part of the simulation. Panicking victims living through real disasters aren't going to be calm and inert. That was a fair point. You've put a lot of work into this. Thanks for volunteering to help us out today. Thank Himiko too, later, sorry, I mean Copycat. She helped me so much when designing these guys. Greenheart was getting more enthusiastic the more he talked. She just knows so much about the human body. I couldn't have gotten all the responses right without her. Oh, does it react differently depending on the injury? Izuku asked. You got it. She and I spent a lot of time calibrating the responses so that the golems accurately react to the type and severity of injuries they could receive. It was pretty hard work sometimes. I had to forcefully hold down a screaming and flailing golem while Himiko stabbed its chest open to confirm that the nerve clusters were working and that it correctly distinguished between different intensities of pain. No one else wanted to help me with that. They were being all dumb and said it felt too much like torturing someone. I don't get it. At least Himiko understands me. Greenheart's eyes gleamed and there was a faint blush on his cheeks. Uh-huh. I'm glad you have such a reliable partner. She sure is. The next step is to design a new model with a proper circulatory system. The plan is to base it on the vascular bundles that transport food in trees and plants. It just isn't right that the golems don't bleed. We'll know that we've gotten the realism down once we can strap down a golem, saw off its limbs, and watch it beg and scream and flail and bleed just like if we were cutting open a real human. Yeah. It's the next generation of anthropomorphic test devices. I have a friend in the business course who'll help me get in contact with the HUC, and hopefully they. Hey, Midoriya. Kirishima jogged over to the two of them. Yaoyorozu wants to scout out the canyon area in advance. Coming with? He could kiss Kirishima for saving him from this conversation, and then he immediately felt bad for thinking that, especially given that he was the one to try to start a conversation in the first place. Yeah, I'm coming. He looked back at Greenheart. You're doing really impressive work. Good luck with everything. Thanks. Take good care of my golems during your training. Sure, Izuku said. Then he and Kirishima jogged to catch up with Yaoyorozu. She was already approaching the entrance to the canyon dome. Yaoyorozu turned to face them. Ah, there you are, Midoriya. Did you learn anything from Akatani? More than he bargained for, yeah. Well, I've tagged one of the golems, so I'll be able to pinpoint the locations of all of them in the area when we start. Yaoyorozu was surprised. Is that another one of your quirks? She asked. That's awesome. Kirishima took his statement at face value. We're gonna rock this, man. Izuku walked up to the dome. They couldn't enter until their teacher returned, but they could peer inside and get a sense of how the zone was designed. The main area consisted of a residential block of houses of various shapes and sizes, all ablaze. A small canyon separated the fiery area from an open, safe field with only a narrow rope bridge connecting the two. Presumably, they'd be tasked with rescuing dummies from the burning town and transporting them across the rope bridge to the safe zone. Midoriya, am I correct that your primary quirk is saving the state of something and reloading it later? Yaoyorozu asked. How far does that extend? Can you preserve the state of this entire dome all at once? I can, actually. Izuku grinned. Usually, he had to touch things to start tracking them with his quirk, but he had a way around that. He walked up to the dome and touched the glass exterior. Git add canyon_dome, asterisk. As long as an object contained other objects, he could treat the entire outer object as a folder, and add everything it contained all at once. He'd noticed all the way back on day one of using his quirk that desk_cabinet had a trailing forward slash, but it had taken him a while to figure out what it meant. Yaoyorozu looked pleased. Can you make regular backups during the exercise so that we can roll back to an earlier point if we need to? Say, if a structure collapses and we need to fix it quickly. Good idea. Git switch C canyon dome. Git commit M. Before starting, he said. All right. Our first save point is before entering the dome. We might not be allowed to use this one, but whatever. At that moment, Loud Cloud zoomed over to him on one of his clouds, returning from showing the other group to their station. Hey, little heroes. Are you already performing reconnaissance over here? Nice job. Looks like you three are ready. Let's do it. Chapter text. Izuku was bang on the money. Starting from the safe zone, their task was to cross the miniature canyon using the rope bridge, rescue the golems from the burning buildings in the model town square, and transport them back across the bridge to the safe zone. To pass the test, they needed to save at least 80% of the golems. There was a big stack of crates in the safe zone that stored firefighting equipment, protective wear, axes, rope, fire blankets, flashlights, various tools, tanks of both dry and wet chemical suppressants, and so on. The narrow rope bridge was intended to be a bottleneck in both directions. You both had to lug the proper firefighting equipment from the safe zone to the fire, and you also had to lug the golems from the fire to the safe zone, both using the same passageway. Izuku could see the tricky balancing act the simulation required of you. What did you prioritize? How many trips back and forth could you afford to take? If you needed a certain piece of equipment but didn't bring it with you, was it worth going back to grab it, or did you improvise with what you had? Well, it would have been a tricky balancing act. Too bad this group had both Izuku and Yaoyorozu. Git grep golem, untracked. Here, let me. Don't bring any unwieldy tools. I can create anything we need when we need it. I'll just anchor all this stuff to me so that I can summon it to us when we need it. Save your quirk for making gear that we don't already have. Make sure everything fits on your utility harness. We're going to need our hands free to carry the dummies back with us. It looks they only gave us a few fire grenades, but that's okay. I can restore them, so we can use them as often as we want. I know the chemical compositions of common fire suppressants by heart, so it's not an issue either way. How often do you think I should save our progress? Every 3 minutes or so. That works. Kirishima, what are you doing? Why haven't you put on your protective gear yet? I don't need it. Have you ever tried to set a rock on fire? You at least need to wear a respirator for the smoke, and you could still overheat. Take these ice packs and put them under your clothes. But I'm planning to charge directly into the fires. The ice will just melt. I can restore the ice packs too. It's fine. All geared up, the three crossed the rope bridge and headed for the town square, walking through a field of dry yellow grass to get there. There were little over a dozen burning buildings. Most of them were single-story homes and fake business storefronts, but a couple of them were multi-story apartment buildings. Yaoyorozu looked a little overwhelmed. They expect us to rescue an entire town for our very first exercise? Shouldn't we start with rescuing one victim from one building? This is UA, plus Ultra, baby, Kirishima cheered. Only half of the buildings have golems in them. I can sense where they are, remember? The other buildings are just decoys. Izuku pointed to one of the houses. That house has 3 golems, so let's start there. His partners nodded and followed him to the burning house. The front door was shut tight and completely aflame, blocking their entrance to the house. They had fire axes that could break open the door, but they would have to get in really close to do it and stand directly in the fire. That wouldn't work. He needed to be able to break open the door from a distance. Maybe he could pull out his slingshot and fire a bowling ball at. Kirishima charged at the door and broke through in an instant. Oh, right. They were a team. Izuku needed to get out of the thought process that just because his versatile quirk could do something didn't mean it was the right tool for the job. He'd spent nearly his whole life thinking about Git, and that might not necessarily be a good thing. You looked really cool busting through the door like that, Kirishima. Real hero-like, Izuku called into the house. Kirishima scratched the back of his head bashfully. Heh, thanks, man. Hey, so, I'm basically fireproof, so is it fine if I go on ahead while you two get stuff ready here? Yaoyorozu nodded. Yes, the dummies represent injured or trapped civilians, so time is of the essence. Go find them and determine the shortest route to the exit. Kirishima gave a thumbs up and marched into the house to find the rescue dummies. Izuku and Yaoyorozu meanwhile pulled out their extinguishers and used them to carve a safe path through the house to carry the dummies back with them. Found them. Straight ahead and to the right. They followed Kirishima's directions and arrived at the living room where 3 golems were huddled up in the far corner. Kirishima casually swung the largest one over his shoulders in a move that was obviously well practiced. Izuku and Yaoyorozu copied his movements as best they could with the two others. The three carried the dummies toward the cleared path, but unfortunately, Izuku wasn't paying close enough attention because his golem's head bumped against the doorframe when he tried to exit the room. Ow! 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 The golem spoke flatly. Izuku cringed. They talk? Kirishima looked creeped out. Yaoyorozu ignored it and remained 100% on task. Let's move it, people, we need to transport the survivors to the evacuation zone. This was probably a good time to make a save point. Git add canyon_dome, asterisk. Git commit m, first house. The three of them exited the house and began hauling the dummies to the safe zone. The golems were pretty heavy, and even with the ice packs the sweltering heat was exhausting, so it was a more difficult task than Izuku expected. Ow! 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 It didn't help that his golem never shut up. They left the town square, cut through the field of dry grass, and then crossed the bridge single file, laboring under the weight of the golems. Okay, we're definitely not doing this right, Kirishima spoke up. It's gonna take way too long to bring the dummies to the safe zone one by one. I was thinking the same thing, Yaoyorozu said. I can create an encampment in the middle of the town square. We can set up some tarps and spray them down with water to keep the area cool and prevent it from catching fire. Does that sound good? Izuku nodded. Let's do it. The exercise proceeded more or less steadily after that. They set up a camp in the town square to temporarily hold the rescued golems, then Izuku pointed them to the next building to tackle. Kirishima led the way, charging straight through walls and any other obstructions that blocked their way while Izuku and Yaoyorozu acted in support roles. Thanks to both their quirks, they never needed to return to the safe zone to get extra equipment. Izuku suspected that they were trivializing a lot of the prepared obstacles. For example, when they found that one of the apartment building's stairwells had collapsed, Yaoyorozu simply created a ladder on the spot. That didn't mean everything went smoothly. Izuku wasn't the only one to accidentally injure the very people they were trying to save. They had one entirely avoidable dummy death as well. They were just exiting one of the apartment buildings when the golem on Yaoyorozu's back started screaming out of nowhere. They all startled for a moment, and then suddenly Yaoyorozu shrieked and slammed the dummy on the ground. The dummy was on fire, and, oh shit, Yaoyorozu's hair was on fire too. She slapped the back of her head violently, starting to panic. I got you. I got you. Kirishima pulled out his fire extinguisher and sprayed it all over Yaoyorozu's face. The foam covered her eyes and mouth, blinding her and causing her to stumble around the hallway. All the while the golem was on fire and screeching on the floor. Ah! The golem wailed, a guttural cry of agony, writhing in pain as it burned alive on the ground. Yaoyorozu would be fine, so Kirishima turned the nozzle toward the golem, hoping to save it or at least stop the fire from spreading any further. The screaming trailed off and died pathetically. It was too late. All that was left of the golem was a charred black corpse soaked with extinguisher agent. Its face was frozen in open-mouthed horror. The smell of burnt rotten wood permeated the air. The three of them looked at each other awkwardly. Let's just keep going, I guess. Besides that mishap, things had gone well enough. After rescuing everyone, they piled the golems onto 3 wagons that Yaoyorozu created. They all hitched themselves to a wagon harness and began the small trek out of the model village and back to the bridge. A nasty surprise was waiting for them there. Oh, come on, Kirishima yelled in frustration. While they were busy rescuing the golems, the fire had spread along the grassy field that separated the town from the canyon. It had reached all the way to the rope bridge, which was now fully ablaze. There was no way they could cross now. Even if they braved the fire, the bridge looked like it would give way at any moment. And there it went. As Izuku watched, the fraying ropes split in two and sent the wooden planks crashing into the abyss below. Good timing. Honestly, this was all simulated, so it probably was timed. He just called it an abyss. But he saw a safety net down there when they crossed the bridge earlier. Out of curiosity, Izuku knelt and felt the grass. As he suspected, the blades of grass felt synthetic, like some sort of plastic. This is all part of the exercise, Izuku said. The grass isn't real, so the fire isn't real either. It couldn't have spread to the bridge unless it was supposed to. But how is that fair? Kirishima complained. None of us have flying quirks or anything. What are they expecting from us? We were supposed to secure the escape route, I believe, Yaoyorozu pondered aloud. I suspect that, normally, teams would have to go back and forth over the bridge more often, so they would have noticed the spreading fire. Then we would be forced to split our focus between saving the victims and saving the bridge. Bah. So now we're just screwed, then? No, it's fine. We prepared for this, Yaoyorozu said. Midoriya, you've been making saves this whole time, right? Izuku grinned. Yup. Excellent. Can you roll everything back to maybe 15 minutes ago? Not just the bridge, but our surroundings as well. We still need to pull the dummies through the field, which we can't do while it's on fire. He'd been making commits roughly every 3 minutes, so 15 minutes would be 5 commits ago. The most recent commit on a branch was called the head of the branch, and you could refer to previous commits using the syntax head, 5 inches, head -5, or 5 commits earlier than the head. He could use the command git reset to roll everything back to that commit. All simple enough. Izuku nodded and declared, git res. He panicked and cut himself off. He almost said it. Testing his suspicions, Izuku turned around and placed a hand on one of the golems. Git add golem, he said. Shit. He tried again. Git add canyon _dome, golem. This time it worked. Izuku grimaced. Okay, bad news. The golems are considered to be part of the canyon dome, so if I reset the environment then it'll also teleport all the golems back inside the burning buildings. Kirishima groaned and Yaoyorozu facepalmed. The clock was ticking. The bushfire was encroaching on them and would soon block the path back to the village. All right, Yaoyorozu said, back in business. We need to leave and come up with a new plan. The fire is spreading quickly. We'll be trapped if we stay here for much longer. Wait. I can still figure this out. Izuku pleaded. He'd been studying his quirk for nearly a year. He should know by now how to restore one thing but not another. His classmates were relying on him. Just hold on a bit longer, please. Fine, but be quick. We don't have much time before the fire reaches us. Okay. Think, Izuku, think. He buckled down and tried to remember everything he could about rewinding changes in Git. By default, Git reset redefines the head of the branch to be any arbitrary commit that I choose. It also has multiple modes like soft and hard. A soft reset leaves the working and staging areas unchanged and only changes the commit that the head points to, while a hard reset reverts everything to a previous state. All of these operations work on entire commits, not parts of commits. What I need to do is split things up so that I can revert everything except the golems. Okay, git reset won't work. What about git revert? That command essentially creates an anti-commit that does the exact opposite of some previous commit. If one commit moves something a meter to the right, then I can use revert to automatically create a new commit that moves it a meter to the left, canceling out the change. Same problem, though. It's still an operation that primarily works on commits as a whole, not specific parts of them. How about git checkout? It's similar to git switch, but while that command can only switch to branches, checkout can switch to any commit and treat it as if it were the head of its own branch, although it results in that annoying, detached head state warning pop-up whenever it happens. Strangely, it also lets me check out specific objects from the index, replacing the working area version of an object with the staged version. I don't understand how those two functions relate to each other. It's another example of one command doing two different things, like how both untracking and deleting objects use git erm. Is there a way of checking out both a specific commit and a specific object at the same time? I don't know. I don't remember. Is git cherrypick an option? That command plucks a commit out of a branch, disentangling it from its surrounding context so that it can be reapplied somewhere else. It's useful to use along with tags so that I can create new branches out of some arbitrary combination of previous commits. It's a good way of avoiding that detached head state. Warning message too. Does the command help me right now? Maybe? I'm not sure. What about git stash? That command does two things. First, It takes all changes made since the last commit and saves it all as a patch object, then it restores everything back to the state of the most recent commit. If I could then use that patch object and only apply, no, goddammit, that's just the same issue in reverse. Instead of needing to partially revert the working area, which I don't know how to do, I'd need to partially apply a patch object instead, which I don't know how to do either. Why does Git have so many different commands for reverting to a previous commit, and yet none of them work? Why is this so complicated? While Izuku was stuck in his head and mired in the complexities of his quirk, the bushfire had completely surrounded them and trapped them by the edge of the canyon. The searing heat pressed in from all sides as the firestorm approached them, suffocating and relentless. "Any time now, Midoriya," Yaoyorozu shouted at him. "I'm thinking," he yelled, the pressure on him building and crushing. "Okay, Izuku, calm down. You're panicking. There might be a way to make it work with one of those other commands, but I don't have time to figure that out right now. Go back to the tried and true, Git restore. That command changes the working area to match the staging area. In simpler terms, real objects are moved to the positions of the virtual objects. But, importantly, it doesn't do anything if the real and virtual positions already match. If I add just the golems but nothing else right now, their virtual positions will be updated and a Git restore won't affect them. But how do I alter the restore command to point to a specific commit rather than its default behavior of using the staging area? Like, I think there might have been something in the manual about this, but I don't remember the syntax for it. But, it should work. As long as that setting exists and I'm not misremembering. I just need to know what the right syntax is, and then, yeah, it's my best shot right now." Izuku pulled out his phone, opened up the Git reference manual PDF he'd saved, and scrolled as fast as he could to the relevant section. "Midoriya. We're trapped in a wildfire. It's going to reach the wagons at any moment. Why are you checking your phone?" Yaoyorozu sounded so pissed with him. I'm sorry, he cried, fingers trembling as he tried to find what he was looking for. Okay, this is it. Okay. Oh god, if this doesn't work then I'll never be able to show my face to Yaoyorozu or Kirishima again. Git, sorry, git add, canyon_dome, golem, asterisk, git restore, source equals head, 5 canyon_dome, asterisk, git restore, canyon_dome, golem, asterisk, he said as clearly as he could, fighting down his nerves. The fire surrounding them vanished and the rope bridge returned to normal. The dummies were still there and unaffected by the command. Oh, thank God. The weight on Izuku's chest lifted and he let out a long sigh of relief. The rest of the exercise was a foregone conclusion. The three of them spent the next few minutes going back and forth across the bridge, ferrying all the golems to the safe zone. When Kirishima arrived with the final golem, a buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the test. They did it. Well done, little heroes. Let's go over your results, Loud Cloud said, standing next to a screen that showed video footage from the activity. The three of them sat on one of the benches located in the area, taking a short break after the demanding lesson. Yaoyorozu had created a handheld mirror and was trying to take a look at the back of her head where her hair had caught on fire earlier. She frowned at what she saw. As a whole, your group did an excellent job, Loud Cloud praised. We don't usually expect students to succeed the first time you tackle one of these courses, but you three rose to the challenge and pulled it off. You worked together seamlessly, leveraging both your own abilities and the strengths of your partners. You all should feel very proud of yourselves. They all grinned at each other, elated. Ha, we rock. Kirishima whooped. First time we've ever done this and we already got it down pat. Ah, no, Loud Cloud said. If this weren't a simulation, all three of you would have died. Bawa. They all let out various noises of surprise. Well, that sure was a downer. Loud Cloud nodded. You all made several fatal errors. Which is to be expected, of course. Your teachers will go over this in a lot more detail tomorrow in class, so I'll just cover a few major things right now. He clicked a button on his remote and a video started playing on the screen. In the footage, Izuku pointed at a wall and said that he sensed golems behind it, and then Kirishima charged straight through the wall in order to reach the dummies faster. You made this mistake several times. If this building were real, the ceiling would have collapsed on you all at that moment. What? Kirishima faltered, but I didn't even touch the support beams. Loud Cloud shook his head. That's not what I mean. Yes, to your group's credit, you made sure to avoid the obvious load-bearing support pillars. The part that you didn't consider was that the building's structural integrity was already compromised. Additional pressure was being put on sections of the building not designed to support that weight, and the impact of destructive actions like knocking down walls would have caused the already precarious structure to collapse. You were busting through obstacles as if you were in a safe, solid, undamaged building, rather than treating it with the caution it deserved. Oh. Kirishima cringed and hung his head. Sorry, guys. I'm not singling you out, Loud Cloud clarified. All three of you were there. I understand that you were prioritizing speed, and that's a good thing, but none of you considered the potential dangers of being so reckless inside a burning building. Like I said, your group made this same mistake several times. He clicked his remote again to show various scenes. Continuing on, none of you were careful about checking for fires out of sight before rushing through areas. That's somewhat excusable for Kirishima, but not for Yaoyorozu or Midoriya. In the footage, Izuku watched himself blindly darting around a corner. From the footage, he could see that the hallway he was thoughtlessly about to run through was fully ablaze. The moment he turned the corner without checking if it was safe, the fires in the hallway extinguished themselves so that he didn't accidentally run straight into the flames. Yeesh, that was embarrassing to watch. Loud Cloud continued, this general carelessness was the main cause of your group's only casualty. The footage showed Yaoyorozu hauling one of the golems on her back through the apartment building, the dummy's head and legs sticking out to either side. She was so focused on reaching the exit that she didn't notice when her gate thrust the golem's head straight into a fire behind her. The golem started screaming. The fire spread to Yaoyorozu's hair, and they re-experienced Kirishima spraying her in the face with his extinguisher and the golem flailing and screaming on the floor as it burned alive. Yaoyorozu had covered her face with her hands, so Izuku couldn't see her expression, but her ears were burning red hot. Loud Cloud clicked the remote again, and the footage changed to show the final stretch of the exercise. Oh no, the scene showed the bridge collapse and the several minutes that followed. Izuku felt bad at the time, but it was so much worse watching it objectively. While Yaoyorozu and Kirishima were panicking and trying to pull the wagons away from the ever-encroaching fire that surrounded them, Izuku just stood there like a total idiot trying to remember the correct commands, half oblivious to the roaring flames that threatened to burn them to ashes. It was mortifying. I'm so sorry, he blubbered. I promise I'll be faster next time. Midoriya, the issue isn't about speed, it's about communication, Loud Cloud said. There's nothing wrong with needing time to do something. You can plan around that. The problem is that you left your allies in the dark in a dangerous situation. Nothing was stopping you from helping your teammates retreat to a safer location before using your quirk, but you tried to do everything yourself without considering the situation as a whole. Izuku nodded, ashamed. It was funny, in its own weird way. Of all the flaws Izuku expected he might have as a hero, he never would have guessed that ego would have been one of them. It came from a different place than someone like Katsuki, of course. Izuku wasn't trying to prove that he was the best, but he was trying to prove that he was capable and deserved to be there. All those years of self-doubt had taken a toll on him. Loud Cloud was completely correct. He should have admitted that he didn't know the correct command and helped the others retreat instead, but that would have been embarrassing, and so he didn't. I know it's a bummer to be confronted with your mistakes in full HD, but let me reiterate that the three of you did a fantastic job, Loud Cloud said. You weren't expected to complete the course the first time you did it. Be very proud. No one seemed very proud. Kirishima was still kicking himself over killing them all multiple times without realizing it. Yaoyorozu was ashamed over causing their group's only causality and hurting the people she was supposed to save, and Izuku was busy rethinking his entire approach to how he used his quirk. It was true, Izuku should have swallowed his pride and been more open with his teammates. But at the same time, the whole situation shouldn't have happened at all. Having to pull out his phone because he couldn't remember the correct command syntax was an inexcusable mistake. He could never afford to do that while battling a villain or something. He needed to be better. Loud Cloud clapped his hands together to refocus everyone. All right. We'll regroup with Greenheart and your classmates, and then let's kick off the next course. They followed their teacher as he zipped along on his miniature cloud, the group all lost in their own thoughts. To make himself feel better, Izuku reassured himself that it could be worse. As confusing as his quirk often was, his saving grace was that he was the only person who could use Git. His manual was written for the original computer program and focused heavily on how to share your work with other people. It covered stuff like remote repositories, and upstream branches, and pushing, and pulling changes, not to mention some even stranger terms like access tokens, and credential authentication. Thankfully, he could ignore all of it. If he had to learn all that too, he might as well give up. It hurt his head just imagining the chaos that would unfold if other people were also capable of splitting the timeline, merging things in, overriding changes, adding their own commits into his branches, and generally mucking about with everything whenever they wanted. He had enough trouble dealing with his own stuff. How would it even be possible to keep track of that sort of thing? It would be like trying to follow a time travel movie with multiple time travelers all independently messing with the timeline simultaneously. Izuku shivered at the mere thought. What a nightmare. Thank goodness Git didn't exist anymore, sparing the world from such a headache. To be continued. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.